We follow a girl who's completely obsessed with a fantasy romance novel, where the main character is an illegitimate daughter ignored by her own family who refuses to marry the monstrous Grand Duke, preferring to enter a contract marriage instead. And yet even the Crown Prince who hides his true identity falls for her, and there are even rumors that she might be a saint. And so the girl closes the book she carries everywhere she goes, like tonight after a part-time shift that left her completely exhausted. Reading this novel all at once has been the one joy of her life, but even she admits the historical accuracy is a mess, and the plot feels strange, pretty predictable and packed with cliches. But even so, she's glad the protagonist got a happy ending, because it kind of made her feel like she was looking at herself. For anyone who reads books, there's something wonderful about the feeling of being in the character's shoes, like you've actually been transported into that world, at least while you're reading, especially when your own life isn't exactly great and you have to deal with all kinds of bad situations. While thinking about all of this, the girl crosses the street, and in that moment of distraction, she ends up tripping over her own feet. It's already too late when she notices the truck coming her way. All she can do is wish she could enter that world. But this isn't a story about a girl who dies and gets sent to another world. This is the story of when a truck driver gets sent into a romance novel. At first, everything is a mess. The road simply vanishes and a completely different place appears. What is this place, and where did it come from? So many questions. But the one stuck right in the middle of all this confusion is the truck driver himself. Somewhere in this new world, we're taken to the situation a girl is facing right now. Her father seems a little irritated by her reaction after revealing he's going to send her off to marry Grand Duke Tantian. This man is part of the Northia family, the greatest sword in the empire. They led countless wars and crushed rebels by force to earn that title, but were later pushed out to the desolate north by the imperial family, who feared their power. One day, the Northia family was mysteriously massacred. Only a single survivor remained, and he took over as head of the family, which obviously caused a lot of gossip among everyone around. People gave him nicknames like Cruel Tyrant, Assassin, or the Monstrous Grand Duke. That's why the green-eyed girl is terrified of having someone like that at her side. That girl is Sate, the disgrace of the Brody family, born as the illegitimate daughter of a humble woman she resembles so much. Ripped away from her mother's arms and only given the Baron's family title because she might turn out to be useful. But in that mansion, there's no one who treats her like a real member of the family. And it was with that wicked smile that her father broke the news, saying she was finally ready to be of some use. It was said that if the marriage went well, they would be able to count on the power and resources of the Grand Duke's house. That made her realize it wasn't a lie. The rumors that the family's finances were going under because of some business the Baron had started. The problem is that the protagonist thinks someone like her could never satisfy the Grand Duke and would probably end up provoking him somehow. Sate understands that if that happens, she'll meet the same end as the Northia family. Despite all the contempt and hatred she gets from everyone there, nothing compares to the fear of being eliminated, which could happen very soon. Trembling with fear, the girl refuses to accept this fate. That's when the day came where she chose to defy her family for the first time, using the excuse that she needed to buy something before heading north. Normally there wouldn't be any guards, but this time one was sent along, which made her think it was purely for surveillance. So the two of them head out into the street, first taking a look at how things are out there. The guy immediately starts saying the situation looks strange and that they should go back, which sends Sate into a panic. They haven't even made it to the alley she was planning to visit, so she says they can't leave just because of that. But the guy makes it clear it was the Baron's orders to keep her safe. With an intimidating look, he asks if she's trying to disobey orders. It was expected there'd be heavy surveillance, but she can't go back to the mansion, not even to think of a better plan, because she doesn't know if she'll get another chance once she's sent to the north. So it's now or never, and the girl uses her suitcase to knock out the guard. That's when her escape begins. Sate runs through the crowd, ignoring people yelling that there's a monster there. She ends up bumping into an old man. As a result, she falls to the ground in the middle of the street, and all she can register is something really strange, something she's never seen before, coming straight at her. All she can think in that moment is that this is the end of the line. She can't do anything, and all she has is an empty Baroness title that was given to her as part of a deal. But she doesn't want things to end like that. Meanwhile, we see the driver, totally confused by everything that's happening. He manages to swerve in time so he doesn't hit the girl who appeared out of nowhere. He calls out to her, thinking she's a student. He's really worried, trying to see if she's okay. And that's where the cliché story kicks in. Sate believes this person who showed up might be able to change her fate. But let's learn a bit more about the driver. He's a 53-year-old man named Bae Tak-jin. He's South Korean and works in the delivery industry. A really simple guy who, in his free time, mostly just thinks about whether he should eat a bowl of goopap for lunch. Right before all this happened, his day went like usual, super busy, and then it finally ended. It was late at night when he was heading home when this happened. He just found himself in a totally different, confusing place, making him think he'd somehow ended up in another country. A really simple man who has no idea what a fantasy romance even is. And then he gets shocked when other people start calling him a monster. Takshin finds their clothes weird and assumes they're just extras filming a movie nearby. He starts thinking about the situation again, figuring it might be better to ask those strangers for more details. But before he can do anything, the redhead makes his first attack, making the truck driver scream in fear. But the guard just tries to stab the rear, even without knowing what that means, while the other guy encourages him, saying that from the screams, it must be working. Thinking they're just crazy people, Takshin starts his truck again, driving around the area looking for someone he can actually communicate with. He reaches the first group of people, stopping his monstrous vehicle to ask some questions. As expected, everyone runs away, and it stays like that until he reaches Sate. From what happened, Takshin just scolds her, saying she can't just run in front of a car because if she gets hurt, he'll end up being blamed for it. Plus, he's already being chased by weird people and it's driving him insane. But he stops complaining when he notices something. She's the first person he's met who didn't run away screaming. Still thinking she's just a student, he tells her to be more careful next time. But before letting her go, he asks what place this is. However, before the girl can say anything, a royal guard finds her location, scaring her. Takshin quickly realizes it's a uniform similar to the ones those crazies chasing him were wearing. This one doesn't seem patient at all. He comes over pissed off, saying the Baron won't let this slide. In that desperate moment, Sate begs him to take her with him. She says she's being chased too, and says he can drop her anywhere. She even says she has money. Takshin is still scared, confused, and desperate about everything that's happened since then. But looking at the girl, he realizes he's not the only one in this situation. With trembling hands, she finally lets go of him. Sate thinks this is how it ends, being dragged back to suffer at other people's hands and then getting eliminated. Desperate, she has no idea what to do right then, until the stranger asks if she's going to come with him. The man says something weird, like for her to sit in the passenger seat, but still confused about what's written on that strange thing. Sate wants to understand what this Jonsok is. Either way, they manage to escape their pursuers and park in an isolated area. The trip was a mess, with the girl showing she had no idea how to even get into his truck, and Takshin is exhausted. He calls out to that student. The driver thinks it's strange that a girl so young is being chased, and it's obvious she's running away. He says he has a question to ask, making the other one really nervous. Takijin quickly notices she's nervous and tries to calm her down, saying it's not dangerous. The man says he's a very kind delivery guy, just a driver doing his job, and that last line catches her attention. Sate takes it like he's some kind of knight, and the delivery guy has no idea. He just thinks that was enough to make the girl feel safe. But the girl thinks that if her father finds out what happened, they won't give up on finding her so easily, so she can't relax. And that's why she's got this man as her driver. So the Baroness won't miss this chance. She asks the man if he can protect her. Meanwhile, somewhere else, destruction is spreading everywhere. A silver-haired man looks at all of it, confused. The carriage driver apologizes, saying there was a small problem over there. Inside that carriage is Tantian Rude Katlos, the Duke of Northdia. At the same time, that guard arrives at the Baron's office. The man is not happy at all about that rude entrance. But after what happened, the young guy doesn't even care. So he reports that the flower bed he worked so hard to grow was destroyed by an unidentified monster. Then he says the second lady ran off with that thing. Right then, the guards who chased the driver storm into the room, making the old man shout, demanding answers. The other two wait for the dark-haired guy to explain the situation, but he's only there because everyone else did the same, just riding the wave. That makes the Baron even more irritated, demanding that he kick the bastard out of his room. The Baron's anger can't be ignored. He stares at the third one and tells him to pay attention to his order. He demands that he bring him the bastards. So we go back to the fugitives. Takian is a bit confused by the request. Like, what do you mean protect this student? The girl doesn't even notice the confusion and keeps thinking he's a knight. Sate pulls a bag of silver coins out of her suitcase. She apologizes for not being able to pay a big amount right now, but makes it clear she really wants to hire him. If Takian's day was confusing before, now it's even worse. Annoyed, the driver asks if she thinks he's going to take money from a kid and says she's being way too bold with an adult. He lets out a sigh and tells her to forget it. Calmer now, Takia says it's weird to keep calling her just student, so he asks her name. She's about to say her full name, but at the last second, she remembers she needs to be careful, so she introduces herself only as Sate. The driver wants to know where he is, if he's still in Korea, and he also wants to know who those people chasing her were and why they were dressed like that. That puts Sate on alert, wanting to know why the knights were following him. But how would Takshin know that? He's the most confused one in all of this. He almost got into an accident on the road, and when he opened his eyes he was there, and every time he tried to ask something, everyone ran off. At least now he knows where he is. Sate tells him it's the Mysoup Empire. Explaining a bit more, they're in a southern city called Tyrannosaurus, pretty unusual. Sate warns that if they stay there, the knights will come after them. She's smart, and she knows that by now her father has probably already heard about everything that happened. The Baroness says that since the driver has nowhere to go, she's offering that he come with her to the capital, especially since with such a long distance, the knights probably won't be able to catch them. She also says there are lots of information brokers there because a lot of people gather there. She tries to encourage him to go, saying he might be able to find information about that strange place. Oh, and there's also someone she really wants to find. Her wish is to find her mother, who she was separated from when she was very little. Meanwhile, Takijin thinks it over. Either way, he has nowhere to go, so her choice is probably the right one. And besides, this girl doesn't seem like she's lying. Takijin surprises her by touching the girl's hair. The man agrees to go to the capital, and he tells her to relax, saying she should smile because that's where luck comes from. Takijin asks the name of the capital, and is impressed that it's called Mamatia, and he starts yelling, "Over to Mamatia." But the voice system can't recognize what he's saying. That makes him panic because it's not working. Desperate, he asks if she knows how to get there. Sate is really prepared. She brought a map with her and hands it over. Takijin looks it over, confused, because he hasn't looked at a map in decades, so he has no idea how long it'll take to get there. All the Baroness can say is that she heard it took about 5 hours by carriage, leaving the man baffled. The driver's worried about gas, but luckily he filled up the tank earlier on the way home. Suddenly, he gets out of the truck, not understanding and calling him Sate. She does the same, following him, not getting what he's doing. Takjin takes a good look at what he's carrying, doing the math. If the truck only runs 1 hour a day, it should still last a week. And, looking at a few return boxes, he wonders if there's anything useful in them. The man thinks up a good strategy while Sate joins him, staring at those things that are way too strange for her world. Without either of them knowing it, they're being watched. Meanwhile, Sate breaks the silence, calling out to the driver, curious about what that big metal thing is. Takjin answers right away that it's a normal truck, and kind of innocently finds it weird that she doesn't know, going on to explain that it's used to transport and deliver goods. All the girl can really compare it to is a carriage. As someone comes closer, she immediately turns toward the sound, making her notice the presence and yell for Takjin, but it's too late, and a sword is already at her neck as the stranger realizes this was the unidentified monster that caused chaos in the street earlier. It's the Duke, smiling as he says it was a good idea to follow them. Then he demands that the driver reveal his true identity. The whole thing happens so fast, catching them off guard. The Duke keeps the sword at the driver's neck. Finally, Takjin realizes it, dropping to the ground, terrified of what, to him, looks like a huge knife. Not knowing who this person is, all Sate cares about is that if this keeps going, Takjin will be in danger. The man asks her not to provoke this stranger, but the Baroness doesn't listen and steps in front of him like a human shield, which surprises the Duke. Stammering a little, Sate says there's been a misunderstanding, and even though she's scared, she explains that it's not an unidentified monster or anything like that, it's just a carriage. She hopes the stranger understands and keeps going, saying the old man isn't dangerous either. As for Takjin, he uses that moment to move around and get out of the Duke's line of sight. Faced with the Baroness's explanation, the Duke says he didn't ask her anything, but she doesn't really care because she's busy trying to understand the signals Takjin is making. The driver takes advantage of the stranger being distracted and uses all his strength to hit him, knocking him to the ground. Even the Duke is shocked by what happened to him, especially when he gets thrown inside that monster. Takjin, meanwhile, is relieved he survived that. He asks the girl if she's okay, noticing her pale face. Anyway, Takjin tells her to hurry up so they can leave, which catches her attention and makes her want to know where they're going next. The driver asks if there's a police station around, planning to take the lunatic who attacked him there. Then the two of them leave in the magic carriage, leaving behind the evidence that the Duke was there. Sate is pretty shaken, wondering if everything is really okay, even thinking that maybe, without realizing it, she did something really bad. She looks out the window at the noise coming from the forest, noticing the knights chasing them, but she doesn't recognize them as being from the Baron's family. They're connected to that person, and that's when she remembers the symbol that was on his cape. That makes her panic. Sate grabs the driver by his clothes, begging him to stop the truck immediately, which totally freaks Takjin out. She quickly apologizes, saying she's just in shock, and after everything she's been through, there's no way she can stay calm. And she explains that the person they've got locked up might be the monstrous Grand Duke. Meanwhile, Tantion is fighting the monster, and soon realizes his attacks aren't working. He decides to be more careful. He feels like a ridiculous idiot, all distracted, just because he let his guard down without noticing. Tantion also didn't expect that man to attack him like a bull, but as expected, it's something interesting. With nothing else to do, he gives up fighting and sits on the ground. In the middle of the darkness, all that's left is the light coming in through the crack. But that doesn't stop him from noticing that the darkness is like it was that day. That day is still alive in his memory. Tian was just a boy when his mother told him to listen carefully, and said that until someone opened the door, he must never leave there. And then she closed the closet door. As time went by, the noises faded away until there was only silence. But instinctively, the boy knew something was happening outside. For little Tian, everything was darkness that scared him, and all he could do was torture himself, going in circles with the same question, when should he open this door? Then he heard sounds outside again, which caught his attention. Tian looked up, hopeful it was his mom, or maybe even his dad and brother, but in the end, it was someone else. Tian is brought back to reality when Takjin opens the door, but before that, Sate tells the driver about them being with the monstrous Grand Duke, and she talks about his cruelties, like cutting off the kitchen chief's head for letting a hair fall into his food. The same was done to the maid for getting his bath order wrong, and also to the butler, who'd been siphoning off the family fortune for years. Sate says that, on top of that, the Duke is also known as the Guillotine of Hell, and anything bad you can imagine that comes with a nickname like that. She even takes the chance to mention the existence of a cruel, murderous tyrant obsessed with power, and the clown who never smiles. Hearing that, Takjin is just confused about whether this is really something he needs to know. Either way, what the girl is trying to say is that the Duke isn't a criminal in the making. He's just a bad guy, freaking the poor driver out so much he speeds up in his truck. Right behind them, the Duke's cavalry is within reach. The blonde guy can't keep going anymore, so the captain orders him to hurry up and get back into formation, while that monster rides off. The silver-haired one just hopes His Excellency can hold on a little longer until he can save him. We go back to the moment when Tian is finally freed. Takjin and Sate have their heads lowered, clearly apologizing for everything that happened. It's the Baroness who ends up being responsible for connecting the two men, explaining that the driver came from a place she can't really explain. She also did the same with the driver, giving him a lesson about status, and luckily for Takjin, it's something he already has from where he came from. Based on that, the Baroness said that if they went to the capital with the Duke arrested, it would be their death sentence. All the man could think in that moment was whether they should at least try to beg, and that's what Takjin is trying to do with a casual tone, saying it was all a misunderstanding, even though a sword had been held to his neck, which earns him an angry look from Tian. Takjin then tells Sate that she should apologize too, and together the two of them do. Tian says it's not something you can apologize for, even if he lost his head right now, and the way he says it scares them even more, especially after the story Sate told. But the Duke surprises them by saying he got interested in him. On the other hand, the only thing Takjin can focus on is the destroyed items, and he asks why he did all that. Tian explains that the time he spent locked up made him decide to examine those mysterious things he'd never seen before. Takjin has to be held back from his outrage, wanting the Duke to pay for the damage he caused. Tian just asks the man to follow him, and promises that if he does, he won't take the crimes into account. The driver quickly leans in to whisper to Sate, asking if he should think this is a good idea. The problem is, there isn't much time for that. Soon the knights are back. They surround the two fugitives. Right away, Takjin says he'll follow the Duke. So the Duke orders the swords to be lowered because he has business with that person, and everyone does it, even the Baron's guard. He calls for Sate, though the situation isn't good. That same guard grabs her by the hair, furious about her attempt to run. Immediately, the driver tries to go to her, but he's stopped. This time, the Duke says he has no interest in that girl, so there's no need to waste time, and tells them to go. At the same time, Sate asks for his help. Now the regular delivery driver is torn about what to do. Takjin has no idea how he ended up in this situation. Not to mention he has no idea what's going on. But either way, this isn't something he can ignore or leave this poor kid in this situation. So the driver ignores his new master. Without wasting time, he goes up to that awful man, hitting him in the head and freeing Sate. Takjin offers his hand, a symbolic way of pulling her to safety. When he turns around, they find the Duke's figure still there. Tian is about to say something, but the driver just pulls him out of the way and tells Sate to get in the truck immediately, doing the same right after. Before leaving, she turns to the Duke, still sprawled on the ground, and says, "Stop talking so casually." Then she speeds up the truck and drives off, leaving the Duke behind. Soon the knights gather, and they find the Duke laughing in a cruel way. In the passenger seat, Sate trembles as she thanks the driver and asks if it's really right to run away from the monstrous Grand Duke. But Takjin just asks, annoyed, why she's being so shy and whether he should say something to encourage her to get out. The driver doesn't seem to have any patience at all. Sate feels guilty for putting the driver in danger, especially since she asked for his protection, and even so, he didn't take her money. Once again, that same old feeling is causing trouble and being useless. But Takjin says it's not her fault, and says he didn't like that guy always talking so casually, like he was an adult. Still, Sate doesn't think that's the only reason, and that the man is only doing it to try to ease his guilt, which is something you'd expect from a noble knight. Keeping his eyes on the road, Takjin is in a bad mood, thinking about that guy and how kids these days don't respect their elders. He asks Sate how she ended up being chased. The Baroness thinks for a moment, and says she just ran away, and that's when she met him. She goes on to say that for the first time she felt like she had any value in her family, but she ended up running away without even showing gratitude, because she was afraid of being eliminated. Forcing a smile, the girl asks if she's such a selfish person, leaving Takjin confused, but he's not there to scold her, quite the opposite. He says if something someone says doesn't make sense, she should just ignore it, and asks, "What's so good about putting yourself down like that?" He regrets that she's so young and still suffering because of her weird parents. This is so new to Sate. After all, her whole life, they made her believe it was all her fault. Like her stepmother saying her birth was a punishment. Even her father saying the only useful thing about her was her looks. Takjin keeps going, saying it's the parents' fault, not hers, and that she didn't do anything wrong. And that he understands that with people like that, she'd be insecure, and says she'll have to work in society someday, but with such a kind heart. Takjin just hopes that with these words, Sate won't think he's so old-fashioned. Still, he knows it's advice that'll be valuable in the future. But right now, saying even one word to young people makes them wary. But thinking once again that he's going to get called an old man, he makes it clear he's not trying to give her a moral lesson. Sate cries because she wanted to hear something like that. He tells the girl to recline the seat and rest, and the trip continues. Sate is going to do what he asked, since she's a little tired, and anyway the knight's company makes her feel safe. Staring at the family photo, the Baroness closes her eyes. After a long journey, the girl ends up waking up with that mental fog of someone who always takes an afternoon nap and doesn't know what time it is or where they are. Finally, they're in the new city. Even though that gets Sate excited, she understands it's not the best time to show it, since they're there for a specific reason. But a moment before getting there, the two of them got out of the truck to stretch after so long in one position, especially Takjin. From where they are, you can already see the city gate. Sate is just relieved they got there earlier than expected, while the truck driver is terribly tired. Speaking of him, the guy was smart about hiding his truck so it wouldn't be visible, keeping things from getting messy again. He's ready to go, but Sate calls him. In her hand is a brown cloak she puts on him. Sate was originally going to wear it since she's on the run, but his clothes draw more attention, so she's just going to change clothes, which might solve the problem. After that, an awkward silence stretches out, until the girl asks him to open the truck door. It was a scary experience changing clothes in the dark. Now in the city, Sate suggests looking for someone, so it's Sate who has the mission of looking for information, asking the city's residents, or walking around looking in every corner. They do that until something catches their attention. A place with a sign that says Jungbo. They go in and are greeted by a peculiar old man. Takjin just yells, "Republic of Korea, South Korea, do you know kimchi?" The man says no because he's never heard that name before, so he'll have to look it up separately. He holds out his hand, leaving the foreigner confused. Then it gets explained, and the owner of the place charges 100 silver coins for the service, which is obviously kind of a ripoff, but they pay anyway. The man finds that coin weird, and even asks if it's real. With a big smile, Takjin assures him it's iron, but it gets rejected right away, which makes the truck driver furious, since 101 don't just grow on trees. This time Sate is the one who's going to handle things, and the man asks if she has anything to trade. With a sad look, Sate says she wants to find someone. It's her mother, a former maid who worked for Viscount Brody's family until a few years ago. That's the only info the girl has. She has no idea where she's been since then, and the man says that with just that clue, it'll be hard to figure out. Sate pulls a few jewels out of the bag and tosses them onto the counter, and says that all of it together should be worth around 300 silver. Sate asks, including the information about Hwangkook, can we get it as fast as possible? The deal is made, and the man tells them to come back the next day. So the two of them leave, with Sate looking a bit down and torturing herself with thoughts that in the end, they still don't know anything. And she keeps asking herself if all the information they requested will really come through. Suddenly, the sound of her stomach growling is heard, making her embarrassed. But Takjin doesn't really care and says the food's on him. After all this running around, he must be starving too. He asks if there's anything she wants to eat while looking around, hoping to find something delicious. Until a scene happens, a drunk guy tries to chase off a cat. But what catches his attention is the beer in the man's cup and the bacon in the cat's mouth. A perfect combo to lure him over to that place. Takjin gets pretty excited and says the girl should go in first, which makes Sate curious about whether there's something he needs to do, but Takjin just needs some time to smoke before going in. Whatever that word means in this world, hearing it makes the girl nervous, and she tells him he can't go around hitting innocent people. Anyway, Sate goes into the tavern and heads to the barmaid to place an order. She sits on a stool, checking out the whole place, getting curious about what's on the second floor, so the woman explains it's an inn they run there. That reminds her she doesn't have anywhere to stay, and the same goes for Takjin. Thinking it's a good idea to stay there at least for the night, Sate asks if there's a room available. She's quickly interrupted by an annoying man who asks if she's alone. He looks her over, commenting that she doesn't look like just some commoner. Stepping closer, he says, "Isn't it dangerous to be alone? How about staying with us?" Scared, Sate begs them to stop. At that moment, a blonde guy with glasses shows up. Seeing what's going on with this stranger looking like he's hurting the poor girl, a voice orders him to let the girl go immediately, and that voice is Takjin's. He demands to know what he thinks he's doing with the girl. Sate gets emotional seeing him there. At the same time, other guys come into the place, with one of them sitting at the table in the back. With things settled, the protagonists are sitting down, and Takjin asks, Why is it that every time I look away, trouble finds you? The old man complains it's because of her lack of confidence and advises her to puff out her chest as much as possible to intimidate anyone, encouraging her to do it. Finally, the food arrives. To Sate's joy and Takjin's sadness, Takjin immediately orders 2 mugs of beer. When it arrives, the driver drinks the refreshing drink right away, but Sate seems unsure about it and explains that she's never had anything alcoholic before. Giving her a pat on the back, already hyped up by the alcohol, the man says it's fine to drink when you're with an adult. Even thinking it's unpleasant, Sate agrees to try it. Takjin watches the scene with a smile. Then the girl downs the whole mug in one go. Turns out, unfortunately, Sate didn't handle alcohol well. The Baroness stands up like she's on fire, knocking a beer barrel onto the floor, and she goes up to those 2 guys who are bothering her, demanding to know who they are. The effect causes even more trouble, with Sate punching the soup and making it splash everywhere, and as a result getting anyone nearby dirty. Luckily, the guy who gets hit stays calm about the mess made by the drunk girl. The blonde guy from before says the 2 of them are a lovely family, but Takjin corrects him, saying they're not related. Then the driver realizes it'd look really weird for some random old guy to be with a drunk, vulnerable girl, something any decent person would call the cops over. But if it's a father and daughter, the worst they do is just get them a taxi. So he corrects himself and says, a father and daughter with a really strong bond. Hearing that catches Sate's attention, and she, super drunk, starts saying weird stuff, basically ready to blow her dad's cover. To deal with it, Takjin gives her a bit more beer. In the end, Sate passes out drunk on the table. Somehow the 3 of them end up sitting together. Takjin apologizes about the soup and the dirty clothes, but the blonde guy doesn't really care. Takjin looks at him suspiciously. This kid seems pretty sharp and knowledgeable, making him think of some confident, friendly government worker ready to register his family. The driver takes the chance to ask the question he's asked everyone since he got there. Like expected, the blonde says he's never heard of a country with that name, and comments about how the old man suddenly ended up in some unknown place. That makes him drift off, wondering if something like that could really happen. Takjin stares at him with a not-so-friendly look. The blonde says maybe it's the goddess's whim, which makes Takjin see him differently. Like he's a good-looking con artist, confident, but at the same time kind of empty, and from the worried look on his face, Takjin realizes there might be something he can't talk about. Suddenly, someone comes through the door, making everyone get chills. It's the Duke. The blonde gets curious about why the Duke of Northia is there, and he looks suspiciously at the driver, who reacts strangely to the visitor. Meanwhile, Taeyeon, who seemed focused on his mission, looks around. It doesn't take long for him to find what he came for. He walks up to the man and grabs his arm, demanding he stand up. But the blonde, whose name still hasn't been revealed, stops him, with the excuse that he's there with his group, making the Duke give him a really curious look. There isn't much Takjin can do, with the drunk effect leaving him all woozy too. The guys are ready to handle it when Sate finally wakes up and tugs on Taeyeon's clothes. They stare at her. The girl looks like she's coming back to her senses, while the Duke recognizes her as the girl he saw earlier. But there isn't much time to think, because Sate ends up throwing up right then, and then she collapses on the floor, still feeling the alcohol. The girl gives a crooked smile, and then passes out again. But jumping back real quick to before that happened, the knights catch up to His Excellency, asking if he's okay, and from the look of it, it's hard to believe he is. Half annoyed, the Duke says they finally found him. The captain explains he went looking since he still hadn't come back, and then found his sword and cloak dropped on the ground. He apologizes for that. Aside from the royal family, the Duke is the Empire's only swordmaster. The captain keeps lamenting, "How could you go through something so awful, oh swordmaster? Letting the sword slip from your hand? How shameful." He cries because he didn't serve His Excellency properly as a guard. But Taeyeon assures him he's fine and there's no need for all that panic. Taeyeon is just focused on his search and remembers the 2 of them whispering about going to the capital. Luckily, he was already on his way to the secondary palace, so he could follow them easily. So they head back to the carriage. Meanwhile, the Baron's guards are just standing there like idiots. Those fools have no idea what to do, so they decide to go back since the Duke is going to handle the problem. So, without any interference, Taeyeon planned to meet Takjin. We go back to that disastrous moment. Taeyeon is speechless about what just happened. Nothing that day seems to be going right, but at least he can see the news that the Crown Prince is there is true. That stranger is actually Rumant Edel Mateus Ron Signiela Hifra. Taeyeon realizes the boy is still going around pretending he's a commoner. Looking like he's sobered up, Takjin finally snaps out of it, and seeing the situation, asks the guys to take off the dirty clothes. First, Sate is laid down between the chairs. Then it's on Takjin to clean up, but with the mess and the stink, the best option is to wash it off quickly. One of the guys even talks back, saying the sir is cleaning the floor carefully with his own clothes. But that's because he can clean and wash them later. Meanwhile, Takjin tries to think of a plan. The Duke is watching the 2 of them interact, regretting that the Crown Prince is blocking his path, so there's nothing he can do there. Taeyeon just asks him to throw away his dirty clothes and leaves, promising he'll be back soon.
With him gone, Takjin takes the chance to ask if the two of them know each other. The prince says yes, but explains they only knew each other when they were kids.
The man asks if they're friends. That simple question makes Rui a little sad. He says he sees him that way, but he's not sure what the other guy thinks about it. Wanting to know more, Takjin asks if they ended up fighting. A bit awkward. The blonde answers that, in a way, maybe they did. Rui says that since they were children, they were close enough to share everything with each other, but now it's hard, even just to have a normal conversation. Like some old wise man, Takjin advises him to start a conversation, and even says he regrets some things in life. He says he realized his heart wasn't in the right place back then, and that he should have reached out first to the people who mattered. The old man says it's time to go back to running away, making it clear that only applies to people like him, since the boy is still young. Looking out the window, they realize it's pretty late and they should leave. Embarrassed about the trouble he caused, Takjin offers to pay the whole bill. Rui tries to stop him, but Takjin won't budge, asking him to just look after the girl while he takes care of things. The driver goes up to the counter to pay and offers his credit card, leaving the other guy confused. He tries another approach, thinking the place doesn't take cards, and offers cash. While he's dealing with that, the prince is on the other side, paying the bill, and he even ends up being held responsible for paying for the mess that was made. At least the problem gets solved, and Takjin writes something down for the boy. He hands Rui a piece of paper, saying he can let him know if he ever needs help, because he'd be happy to return the favor. Rui is curious about what happened to Taeyeon, so for now he figures he should just accept it. He looks at the paper and doesn't understand that bunch of numbers written on it. When he goes to ask about it, he realizes the two of them have already just left. Outside, Takjin is carrying Sate on his back. He does it while humming a song. The girl starts crying, complaining about the noise, and the driver asks her not to ruin his clothes. Dragging the girl away from there, Takjin pauses for a moment and looks up at the sky, shining full of stars. It reminds him of his simple life as a delivery guy. He wonders how long it's been since he last saw the stars in Korea. With a smile, he keeps walking, treating it like a weird thing. It's morning again. Sate slowly wakes up, totally confused, not knowing where she is. She doesn't even have time to try to think about it because Takjin surprises her. He noticed she woke up. His face is wet from washing up and he's holding a toothbrush and a towel. Worried, he asks if she's feeling okay. Sate calls his name like she needs to make sure it was all real. Yesterday was insane. She ran away from her family, met Takjin, and went to the capital. Not to mention the adventure on the way where they captured the Duke and still ran from knights. Her head hurts as she tries to process even more things. Then she remembers she went to the tavern and drank a lot, breaking everything in front of her, and she also remembers the embarrassing moment of throwing up on those two. Meanwhile, Takjin asks if she's okay. Sate's face is as pale as a ghost. Takjin hands her a drink and tells her to drink it because it'll make her feel better. Sate takes a good look at that weird thing. Then she stares at the man, not getting it, so Takjin opens the can. The driver looks at her, worried, because she looks like a complete mess. And the worst part is remembering that a lot of it is his fault for encouraging her to drink, and then pushing a few more beers on her. All he does is tell her that once she's feeling better, she should follow him. Then the two of them are near the river. Sate looks at herself in the river and asks, really curious, how he managed to find a place like that. Takjin gives a simple answer. He just listened to the sound of the water running and knew. Seeing her staring like an idiot, the driver tells her to hurry up and wash her face first and clean herself up. Sate does it, or at least tries to, scooping up some water with her hands. Takjin shows up beside her, asking how long it's going to take if she keeps putting it off. With that, he sticks his hand in her face, explaining she needs to scrub hard like that. Then he asks if she feels refreshed. At that moment, Sate has a little flashback to the night before, when the man said they were father and daughter. She looks at the driver, and then I smiled and nodded, like I wanted to make that real. Taking advantage of this moment together, Sate asks if, while he was asleep, he talked to someone else. Takjin confirms it, saying he didn't get much information, and mentions the good-looking young guy who suddenly started talking about gods and other stuff. At that moment, the driver stops to think about how everything is actually really weird, like his phone, which has been out of service ever since he got here. He also noticed there doesn't seem to be any building that looks like an embassy, so he wonders how any of this can even be possible. He tells the girl he thought all of this was some kind of cult, but now it feels like maybe it's some kind of divine prank. Sate says, very confidently, that he's right. At first, she was mistaken, thinking the man was a knight from a foreign land and that it's possible what he said is true. Because of that, the Baroness says they need to meet the saint immediately. In this world, there's the goddess Marika, omniscient and omnipresent, able to foresee the future and so on. Basically something straight out of a founding myth. So, under her divine authority, the current Mysoup Empire was born, and the one who delivers the goddess's words is none other than the saint herself. Sate says that if they get help from the saint to ask the goddess to send them back to Hwangkook, that idea gets Takjin excited, and he asks where they can find her. But the Baroness feels a little offended and tells him off for not treating the saint like some tourist attraction. Then she explains that the sainthood is a vessel for the goddess, and that's why the role has always been carried by the Empire's first princess. Hearing that, Takjin asks if the goddess is hereditary or something. Sate keeps explaining that unless you're a member of the royal family, or at least a high-ranking noble, you can only see her during the big annual ceremony. Their situation is kind of complicated, since they're dealing with a runaway noble and an illegal immigrant monster. Takjin asks if some noble could help them with that, but thinking about the only person they know, it doesn't seem like a good idea. Obviously, they drop that idea. With a clearly worried look, Takjin asks if there's really no way to go back to Korea. Sate confirms it and realizes it's the first time she's seen him like this, so she needs to think of some way to help him. That's when an idea comes up. Sate says there's someone who can help them. Takjin immediately asks who it is. A little awkward, the girl says it's someone who might have the potential to help, and that makes Takjin desperate to understand what she needs. Sate remembers that boy. If he really is the Duke's friend, there's a chance he's a high-ranking noble, but the Baroness questions why he was in that place, which makes her think he either did the same thing she did and ran away, or his status fell. Looking at it that way, they can't guarantee they'll get help. Still, first Sate wants to go back to the source of information where she left the jewels as payment. If they can't find a way, their last hope will be asking the blonde guy for help. Meanwhile, we have the Duke at the palace. He stops on the way when someone calls out to him. It's the prince. Rui asks if he's leaving after seeing his majesty. Finally, Taeyeon turns to face him. The prince looks worried as he asks, or did his majesty make another ridiculous request? Taeyeon doesn't answer him. He just greets him properly, calling him the little son of the empire. That makes the prince sad. But then he remembers what Takjin told him in the past, and what he said about regrets, especially about not being the one to go after the important people in his life first. Rui apologizes, leaving the Duke confused. Stumbling over his words a bit, the boy asks if it had anything to do with the man from last night, since he seemed so serious, and says he's sorry he couldn't help. Taeyeon just says the man only had something peculiar about him that made him curious, so Rui shouldn't worry about it. Then Rui pulls something out of his pocket and hands it over, explaining that Takjin gave it to him, and he says that if Taeyeon is still looking for him, this might be a clue. Taeyeon immediately takes the paper and, with a sly smile, thanks him for it. The Duke says he has something urgent to do and hurries off, leaving the prince behind. But before leaving for good, the Duke stops, just to say that next time he goes out, it might be a good idea to take a guard along. A little awkward, and maybe even surprised by that, Rui thanks him for the concern. Back to our main duo. Sade is at the shop, where the man says that even after a long, thorough search, he couldn't find the name anywhere, and he believes that if they go somewhere else, it'll be the same, because Hwang-kuk doesn't exist. But it doesn't end there. He drops a shocking reveal about where Sate's mother is. Finally, Takjin walks in. He asks the girl if they managed to find anything. The Baroness turns around, and with a forced smile says no. That makes Takjin think about how he's spent his life chasing after one man. Ever since his mom left home, he's never heard from her again, and that made him lose his purpose. But now he has a family waiting for him. The two of them go sit outside to eat a little, and with their last option left, Sate wants to know how they're going to find the prince. Confidently, Takjin says that won't be a problem since he gave him his phone number. But it doesn't last long. When he remembers the reality of that world, he gets disappointed and suggests going back to the restaurant. Sate starts thinking, if that boy is really friends with the Grand Duke, then Taeyeon's attendants must have seen him at least once. And she mentions she heard there's a separate estate near the capital for his family, but even so, finding the Duke at some point is no guarantee it'll happen. Takjin asks if they can't just stop people along the way and ask them to take them to the Duke's house. Whether it's luck or just coincidence, the coachman stops his carriage and asks if they want to go there. And that's how they end up at the estate, and Takjin has to drag the scared girl along, standing at the gate thinking it's some kind of apartment complex. He asks what building it is and what the unit number is. Then he's completely stunned when he finds out all of it belongs to the Duke. Takjin imagines the maintenance fees must be insane, but either way, now's not the time to worry about that. At that moment, a knight asks what they're doing there. That makes Sate scared they'll get caught, but Takjin tells her to stay calm and just do whatever she does. Takjin acts casual, like he's only there to enjoy the dry breeze, so the Baroness does the same. But their plan doesn't work out too well. Now the driver realizes pretending to be some innocent hiker doesn't work anymore, at least not there. As he's being taken away, the man protests that he didn't know it was private property. In the middle of the confusion, a firm voice behind them says, "You saved me the trouble of looking for you." It's the Grand Duke. After getting a bit of amusement out of the scene, the Duke tells them to let them go, and his order is carried out. Taeyeon asks if they're there because they have something to discuss. Takjin is about to ask something, but Sate stops him. But what was he supposed to do in that situation, right? He somehow just found the Grand Duke. Meanwhile, Sate believes that this way the two of them are going to end up crushed by the fury of that cruel man.
In desperation, Sate throws herself at his feet, apologizing. She says, "I sincerely apologize for not recognizing your grace and for committing such an offense. I fully accept whatever punishment you deem appropriate."
At that moment, Sate already believes she's about to lose her head, and she thinks that if she hadn't met him, her end would have already come. And thanks to him, she managed to learn about her mother, and that's enough. Through tears, Sate says, "It might sound unbelievable, but Mr. Takjin is someone from another world." Those words shock the Duke. Sate continues, saying he isn't dangerous and he just wants to know about the Duke's friend. Taeyeon steps close to her, holding her by the chin as he asks her to repeat the story properly. With her face wrecked from crying, the girl only lets out a "huh?" Inside the palace, Takjin is impressed, admiring everything and calling it home. He even says it looks like a real palace, and Sate has to tell him to be quiet. She's relieved that, for now, the Grand Duke didn't get rid of them, at least not yet. Taeyeon goes to his butler, announcing that he should prepare the reception room for his guests, and also a letter. With those orders given, he leaves. Jeeves tells them to follow him. He leaves them in the reception room and asks them to wait there for a bit. Takjin says he was right about coming there first, and the girl ends up agreeing. Sate thinks the Grand Duke has seemed really intrigued by Lord Tagbay from the start. The door opens once again, this time with Taeyeon and his friend. Sate immediately stands up to bow, while Takjin keeps sitting there, thinking about how he is the only one still wearing the same clothes since this story started. Sate introduces herself. Takjin does the same, but in a weird way, saying, "Ba Takjin, 5th year, class 3. That catches the girl's attention, and she asks if he isn't Lord Tagbay, but the driver reminds her it was her who decided to call him that. Cutting off this monologue, the Duke introduces himself as Tantian Rude Katlos Northia and says this is his private village. That information knocks the driver out for a bit, until he snaps back, "Ah, Grand Duke?" The blonde guy just introduces himself as Rui. By the way, he asks if the two of them aren't father and daughter like they said last night. The topic right now is Sate's escape, and they want to know how she did it. With her head down, she admits it wasn't anything special. She just ran away from her family to avoid an unwanted marriage. Shocked, the prince asks who the suitor was that pushed her that far. Meanwhile, the Duke is completely uninterested in this conversation. Still, they're expecting an answer from Sate about it. But the girl starts getting nervous under the look she's getting. So she ends the subject by asking why they want to see him. That's when they say they want to see the most holy one, in other words, the princess. The Duke even steps out of the way so he won't get hit by the shards from the glasses. Sate explains they need the goddess to send you back to your original world, and asks if he can help them with that. The problem is the saint you're looking for might be someone who knows him really well. So Rui apologizes for that. He says he can't help because he's not actually a noble. Now everything seems ruined and Takjin doesn't know what to do, until the Duke cuts in and says he can help with that. With a teasing smile, he suggests they make a deal, which makes him think something like, "This kid barely got out of diapers and he still wants to make a deal with me." Anyway, the two of them go to where the truck is hidden. Takjin is the one who led him there. At least there's a little bit of gas left, but he asks how they're going to take it home without causing chaos with people seeing it out in the open. But the Duke says not to worry because he has a way to handle it, and it seems to have worked because people on the street are really excited as they pass. Of course, for that, the driver had to be taken inside a wagon, caged up, and his truck right behind. Because of this whole act, people think the Duke captured the monster and is taking it to his private village. Some call out to the Duke, asking him to look at them, while most demand that he execute the man who brought the monster. But to get to that point, first Taeyeon proposed the deal. Hearing that makes Sate worried because she realizes the delivery guy is making the same face he made when she wanted to hire him as a knight. Like he just heard something he definitely didn't want to hear. To make it worse, Takjin is getting mad at the Duke, and that's terrifying because it means they're going to lose their heads over this, so she steps in and asks the delivery guy to calm down. But neither of them listens. The conversation keeps going without Rui, who left earlier since he couldn't help. Taeyeon goes over the details and says what Sate said is a little off. Then he explains it better. First, it's true that nobles can request an audience with the saint, but that doesn't mean you can meet her whenever you want. The saint rarely appears outside formal public events, which are completely closed off. Hearing that makes them worried. The Duke keeps talking, reminding them that in 6 months the founding festival will be held, and when the time comes, that's when he'll take him to the saint. Taeyeon offers them a place to stay in the village until that day comes. Smiling, he says it's a generous offer. Takjin doesn't say much about those details, so he goes straight to the point and asks what he wants in return. All Taeyeon wants are items from the other world. There are rumors going around that the Duke is secretly full of curiosity and academic passion. Meanwhile, Takjin still thinks this whole saint thing is ridiculous. But given his situation, he doesn't know how long he'll be stuck there, and he doesn't have a single coin to spend. He's not in a position to refuse.
so he accepts the deal. Ogden has the contract in hand, but those words are so confusing, not even in English, that it makes Sate think he can't read. Anyway, the man signs. The Duke is interested in one single thing and asks him to hand it over. With a pen in his hand, Tian starts clicking it like a kid with his favorite toy, but Toggen doesn't like it and tells him to stop before he breaks it. While the two of them argue over the pen, Sate thinks that with the Duke's word, even if it takes time, her lord will be able to find the saint and return to his original world.
Snapping her out of her thoughts, Takshin asks the girl if she'll be staying there too, and he explains to the Duke that she has nowhere to go, so Tan doesn't really mind. A little scared, Sate asks if she can really stay there. Then Takshin gives her a bit of confidence, saying the Duke already allowed her to stay. We go back to the parade where the monster is being taken away. Remembering that conversation, Taeyeon comments that he seems to care about the girl. Takshin says he has a very precious daughter, and he values her more than anything. And if she had grown up, she'd be about Sate's age, which makes it clear the girl left for the other world forever. His lord says Sate is so shy, always looking around all nervous and apologizing for everything, so there are plenty of reasons to worry. Taeyeon thinks about Takshin's words. They finally arrive at the village, and the handler tells everyone to move as he opens the cage. The captain helps him down and thanks him for cooperating with the act, since it was really exhausting and kind of humiliating to do. Still awkward, the silver-haired guy says he should apologize for the misunderstanding earlier, but Takshin is totally calm about it. Something is happening that grabs everyone's attention, including the handlers. There's a furious man yelling at the knights, and Takshin is curious to know who he is. We go back to the day before, when Tantian went to the capital, right when the Baron's guard fell behind. They didn't know what to do, so the redhead suggests they abandon the mission and split up. Apparently, that decision wasn't the best one. The Baron yells about the captain of the guard's stupid decision and demands they go back and find where the girl is, insisting they bring her back no matter what. Yoon got a report that Sate was at the Duke's house, but there was no way to sneak in. But at least that information left the Baron pretty satisfied. His lord was genuinely shocked when he got the news that his daughter ran away, and he knows Sate must have already realized that. In the end, she's still in the palm of his hand. To the Baron, everything is going even better than he expected, knowing that if his daughter manages to attract the Grand Duke, the marriage process will move forward immediately. And with the groom's wealth and power on the line, the Brody house's problems will be solved. Tan looks surprised by the marriage proposal. The Baron explains that he'd planned to send a formal marriage request soon, but apparently his daughter was very eager, saying she entered the village before him. Tan remembers the girl, thinking she'd already been told about him. The Duke makes it very clear he doesn't know what misunderstanding happened, but he has absolutely no intention of marrying Sate. The Baron tries to argue that he let the girl into the village, until he thinks maybe he got things wrong. And from the Duke's face, that doubt is definitely answered. But the Baron is willing to do anything, so he comments that it's been a while since the Duke has been putting off an engagement with the second Imperial Princess. Then he asks, "Don't you need a puppet by your side? Use that girl." He suggests using his daughter until he doesn't need her anymore, and makes it clear he can do whatever he wants as long as he keeps her alive. And he adds, "Like you can probably tell, I raised her to obey without questioning." The Baron is basically selling Sate, saying that in return the Duke could offer a small reward. Tan says sarcastically that things don't always go the way you expect. At that moment, Takshin cuts into the conversation. He'd been listening from the start, but realized he couldn't let things stay like this, and asks right away if he's the girl's father. Takshin also doesn't flinch when his identity is questioned, making it clear that's none of his business. His lord is ready to say everything he's been holding back to this man. Then the man fires back, saying he understands the girl is a bit rude, but there's still no reason for all this, insisting that Sate isn't the type to do something like that. Takshin won't accept him treating the girl like that, and makes it clear the Baron shouldn't have the right to be called her father, not if he treats her like this, like she's just merchandise. The driver walks up to him, pointing at his own chest, and says, "Is that what your parents taught you?" The Baron, pissed off, yells, "How dare you touch me!" Meanwhile, far away from all that mess, Sate is at the palace, totally exhausted because she couldn't sleep last night with so many thoughts, and because of that she missed the delivery guy leaving with the Duke that morning. The butler is there, greets her, and says he hopes she had a good, restful night. Sate smiles and says she managed to rest thanks to him. Jeeves comments that the girl will be staying in the annex for a long time because of the driver's situation, and that she'll probably need a proper companion. He calls over one of the maids. The butler assigns the maid to serve Sate exclusively. The Baroness hears that and refuses, saying she isn't someone worthy of that kind of treatment. But the other girl is already excited to work with her, and introduces herself as Daisy. Sate lowers her head, ready to refuse. But Daisy is quick and asks her to speak more calmly. At that point, the Baroness throws herself on the floor, but the maid is the more dramatic one of the two. Sate ends up accepting and asks to get some fresh air, and Daisy offers to come along, since the garden is so huge you could get lost on the grounds. So the two of them go outside. Sate is completely worn out from how much she had to walk, especially with the stairs, but at least it helped clear her mind on the way to the annex. Right then, the Baroness notices something. Daisy keeps talking to herself about how beautiful the place is, and when she realizes she's not getting a response, she asks if something's wrong. But Sate just took off, totally ignoring her companion calling out to her. Sate saw her father and is desperate to know what he's doing there, and then she witnesses the whole mess. Her father grabs the driver by the shirt over the insult, trying to scare him. Takshin asks the Duke to call the police. Taeyeon doesn't say anything, he just grabs his sword. The Baron shoves the driver away and goes back to telling the Duke that he understands he didn't want his daughter, so he demands that he at least take her away from there. But with a big smile, the Duke says he can't hand the lady over, which leaves the Baron confused. Taeyeon can't let the girl leave because he hired her. Well, at least that was a good excuse he took a while to come up with. Sate, standing there listening to everything, doesn't understand it. Meanwhile, His Grace explains that if he wants to take her, he has to follow the proper procedures, but the Baron thinks that's ridiculous and even questions the Duke's honor. In response, Taeyeon puts his sword to the man's neck in a threatening way. With a serious look, he asks, "Do I need to say it twice?" Takshin is furious, but at least that arrogant guy left. Now alone, Taeyeon asks if there's anything she wants to say. He turns to look at the person he asked. Sate walks up and asks if what he said earlier is serious. Takshin, hearing her voice, gets a huge scare and asks how long she's been there. Taeyeon ignores him and makes it clear to Sate that he only did it because he wouldn't be able to deal with the otherworld traveler alone, and that's all he has to say. The Duke walks past her with his unshakable posture without saying another word. Sate stays there, stuck in her thoughts that she escaped the Baron's estate unharmed, and even not being able to live in the Duke's mansion, none of it was her choice. It was because of that unknown man, and thinking about it, even with that escape, one way or another she ended up with the Duke, just like her father planned. Meanwhile, Takshin goes over to the girl, worried about whether she's okay. She apologizes, saying she did nothing but cling to him and rely on his help. She regrets that now the driver is in trouble with her father. With deep sadness, she admits she feels like a burden. Those words catch Takshin off guard, but the man's reaction is to flick her forehead in a rough way. Takshin tells her not to think like that, and asks how she could be a burden when, thanks to her, he found a way to get back to Korea. He says that's what matters most, and makes the girl look at him when he says she did really well. Maybe it's the first time the Baroness has ever heard a compliment like that in her whole life. Takshin tells her not to feel pressured or anything like that. She's still a kid. He takes the chance to scold her, saying a kid should eat well, run around, and study a lot. And he wraps it up in style, saying that's all she needs. Without wasting any more time, Takshin tells her to go to the Duke and ask him to write up a work contract for her, something the Baroness obviously has no clue what it even is. And that's how their life in the Duke's private village began. The first place Sate goes is the library. It was her request, and the Duke suggested she act as the place's manager while she was there. Either way, that permission made her happy. Sate thinks that even if they find the saint later, it'd be a good idea to start gathering information now. She starts searching through the volumes, aware that a library that big might have clues not even informants could find. Daisy also does her part, bringing a bunch of books about magic, witchcraft, and anything else she could find. The attendant comments that she figures Sate knows about fortune tellers, but apparently she doesn't, even though it's already a topic going around among the maids. Daisy explains she heard that someone got the person they loved on the exact day that was predicted, and that someone with an incurable illness had it disappear right after buying a necklace from there. She says it must be something mysterious, or at least that's what people say. But that's important information for Sate. She thinks she might find a clue there about Hango, and of course about that mysterious phenomenon. After that conversation, Sate leaves the library. She thinks she needs to tell the Duke and the driver so they can go together to see the person who does the predictions. The Baroness gets word from the butler that the two she's been looking for are investigating the truck at the training field. She finds Takshin telling the Duke not to do anything, while the guys are stuck in an awkward situation, all because the driver wants to stop him from getting in since he doesn't have a license to drive, and on top of that, if they waste the gas, they won't be able to drive later. Before anything else, the first thing they did was check the trunk to see what was in there, since Takshin didn't have time to check when he had a sword at his neck. The items are a portable fan returned because the charging port is broken, a thermal bottle exchanged because it had a leaking defect, plus other stuff like callus remover, 2 liters of water, fuzzy socks, and other little knickknacks that are already in the Duke's hands. Takshin grabs a bottle of alcohol that was in there too, which puts a huge smile on his face. Sate comes up, asking to be excused for interrupting, but saying she has something really important to tell him. Then the girl tells him everything, and he just stays quiet and listens. After all that, Takshin just says he doesn't believe in that kind of thing. His argument is that humans should be born from the earth and live as simply as flowing water, but Sate insists they might be able to find at least a small clue, which honestly isn't a bad idea since they'll be stuck there for 6 months. Meanwhile, the Duke is irritated by the whole conversation, knowing he won't be able able to allow it to happen, so he'll have to ruin that plan. Then Taeyeon jumps into the conversation and says he's coming too. Being innocent, the girl thinks he decided that because he's bored, so the three of them go to the tent wearing hoods so nobody will figure out who they really are. They go in carefully so they won't be seen. The fortune teller greets them with, "I can feel a kind of special energy," and points at Takshin, saying he got involved in something mysterious, leaving the foreigner totally impressed. The mage goes over to his crystal ball and, like he's explaining to an audience, says, "This character isn't important, just a random extra passing by," because the author simply wanted to try drawing the Tower Master but didn't get the chance. He lays the cards on the table and says that worried face is definitely a health problem. The mage pulls a few more cards and takes a look while commenting, tossing out some cards that pointed to financial problems. But then he looks at Takshin, asking if he thought that was his guess. Actually, he was just joking, because the problem is, which the driver confirms. In reality, Takshin realized right away this guy is just another scammer. The fortune teller even asks him to wait, saying he can already see it, and that in this episode he'll meet a special person. Takshin turns his back on the fraud and walks out. With that, Taeyeon says they should come back soon, but the driver yells no. He points at the carriage and says it was pure torture earlier when he had to use that. For the driver's luck and the Duke's bad luck, Sate reveals that, just in case, she already checked out all the other famous places that also do predictions. That ended with the Duke declaring that everyone's illegal business operations had to be shut down. While all the mages are getting arrested, Takshin decides to go for a walk while smoking, and he says, "You two should spend some time alone." Sate and Taeyeon are left behind. Then they look at each other at the same time. Now it's just the two of them there. Meanwhile, Takshin purposely heads into an empty street. He walks around while smoking. He stands there for a while until it runs out. So he decides it's time to head back. He does that by turning on his heel and walking back. But for some reason, he speeds up when he feels like something is following him. Takshin turns around to see what it is. He just finds a dog, and the fortune teller's line pops into his head. In this episode, you'll meet a special connection. Takshin is shocked when he realizes it wasn't a person in this case. Meanwhile, Taeyeon and Sate were left alone. Turns out the girl ran away so she wouldn't have to marry him, and now the Duke knows everything, so the vibe is unbearably awkward. Sate is really nervous, not knowing what to do, and she even wonders if she should say something just to break the ice. The Northia house is really isolated from the world, so if it weren't for the portrait, she wouldn't have any idea that Taeyeon doesn't look anything like a monster. Noticing her fixed stare, Taeyeon asks if she has something to say, and since she's so lost in her thoughts, Sate accidentally lets it slip. Handsome, and what a way to break the ice. But she's quick to make up an excuse, pointing at some random guy and saying he's her type, like totally handsome. The guy is surprised. After all, that's the best thing an extra could ever hear. Sate says she has something serious to tell him, but what just happened was so embarrassing that it ended up taking all that pressure off her. The Duke asks what it is this time, and lowering her head as a sign of respect, the girl apologizes. Not making a big deal out of it, Taeyeon says she already apologized for being careless last time, but the Baroness surprises him by saying the apology is for judging his character based on rumors. She says that through the conversations they've had over the last few days, she's come to understand him better, and despite what the rumors say, he's an incredibly nice person. And there was that embarrassing moment where she threw up on his clothes, and even then it didn't bother him. Still with her head down, the Baroness says she was worried she'd hurt him and wanted to apologize for that. Taeyeon says it's fine, and that he's aware of the rumors that have always surrounded him, but he doesn't care about that anymore. It seems like saying those simple words made the monstrous Duke embarrassed. With a little smile, the girl says Jivisa made that pretty clear. Sate then asks if the rumor about him making the butler lose his head was a lie, but Taeyeon surprises her by saying it's true, and it happened in the middle of training. Already far away from him, the girl says she'd like to look for a gift for the driver while she waits. The Duke gives a small, almost unnoticeable smile as the Baroness walks off to look for the ideal present. Meanwhile, Takshin is staring at that dog, pretty impressed by the fluffy animal just standing there. But something catches his attention. The little animal is really hurt. Like the dog could answer, he asks what happened to those injuries and where he can find a university hospital to take him. At that moment, a really angry man shows up, asking him to hold the dog. Takshin asks if he's the owner. He confirms it, calling the animal a scammer, and says it suddenly ran off. The dog clings to him, shaking with fear. This is an awkward situation for our traveler. The man thanks him for catching his animal and says he's going to take it back to its place. But Takshin isn't going to let this innocent one go back to that guy, so he asks how much he wants for him. It wasn't even that hard, because the man offers 50 coppers. But since Takshin doesn't have that, he points to where his companions are. The driver thinks about calling them on his phone until he realizes a phone is totally useless there. Already out of patience, the man says if he's not going to buy him, he should give his dog back. But Takshin makes it clear that's not it, and that he just needs to get the money. But that doesn't make things better. The man is ready to take his anger out until a huge shadow covers him. Taeyeon appears behind Takshin, asking in an intimidating way what he thinks he's doing. And of course the man doesn't want to face the monstrous Duke, so he leaves the dog there and runs off. Takshin asks how he found it, and Taeyeon says it was just instinct. Meanwhile, Sate pets the animal, looking at it with this pitying stare like she can't believe someone would do something that cruel. Someone suggests leaving the dog at the vet so they can head out. Feeling really bad, Sate says the animal is pretty badly hurt and that they should take care of it until it recovers and can be let go. But Takshin is totally against it, saying they're already doing their part by getting it treated and that an animal shouldn't live with a human. He even threatens that if they bring it along, he'll run it off. So Sate has to make that abandoned puppy face, and the dog does the same. Both of them are staring at him like crazy. In the end, Takshin agrees, but on the condition that the dog stays outside and he won't let it come in where it doesn't belong. Meanwhile, Taeyeon is just standing there looking dumb watching all this, because they forgot the private village is his. The prince walks through that area full of angel statues. There's a really big one, and in front of it there's a girl kneeling. It's someone Rui hasn't seen in a long time. Princess Ramoa. She stands up and greets the Empire's little son. With a sad look, her brother asks if it's really necessary to keep being so formal. The girl's look is sad too when she says that isn't possible. Ramoa asks what a busy man is doing there. Rui asks, "Tell me, Ramoa, you really can't communicate with the goddess, right?" The saint suddenly starts shaking in a scary way. Ramoa asks if he came just to ask that, and she even yells, "How dare you even bring that up?" The girl is nervous and really worked up since for most of her life she's been trapped in this temple she calls cursed. She says, "I had to pretend to be the saint, but for what?" Ramoa asks what he did. The girl says that because he's the first imperial prince, he got everything he ever wanted his whole life. Rui panics, trembling, and says that isn't true. He says he never wanted that, and if he could, he'd let her take his place. The two of them are distant, both physically and emotionally. After hearing that, Ramoa says that's exactly what irritates her the most. She notices the Pope there and comments to him, so she asks him to leave so she can pray to that damn goddess. Two important figures show up. One of them is the High Priest. Some time passes while the visitors are staying in the village, and to their relief, the dog is almost healed too. Sade is the one who took care of the animal's wounds, since she has experience with that from taking care of her own by herself for a long time. Meanwhile, Takjin bombarded her with questions, even asking if she had dog food and everything. So she thinks it was thanks to him too, since he cared a lot. Sade also didn't like the idea of calling the animal just dog, so she suggests they should give him a name, which Takjin doesn't think matters. Meanwhile, the Duke wants to know why they just left the dog inside his village. The two of them are more worried about the name, and Sade even suggested ideas like Coco, Cookie, and Hazel. But to Takjin, Turd is definitely a good name. Tion, who hears the conversation, says it's a perfect name for something really nasty, because Turd is peeing on his leg. That makes Takjin burst out laughing. Sate watches him, and thinks maybe she doesn't know just how affectionate the Duke is. Right now, the Baroness is looking for the driver. She wants to give him the gift she forgot because she got so busy taking care of Turd. Then Sate finds him washing up at the fountain. She comes over saying he can just tell her and she can help with that, but the man says he can do it himself and asks what she wants. Sate hesitates a little. She shows the gift. The girl asks if he remembers the day her father showed up, and says she was worried it might have ruined his precious shirt. Then Sate reveals the shirt she bought. The quality isn't great, but she paid for it with the money from her job at the library. Kind of speechless, Takjin says she shouldn't have done that, and honestly, looking at it, she really shouldn't have. Still, he thanks her for the gift. But the Baroness notices the man looks kind of sad. The two of them stay quiet for a while. Meanwhile, Tion is watching the two of them, and he also has a gift, which he ends up hiding. Soon night falls, and the driver takes the chance to have a moment. He notices someone coming closer, and it's the Duke. Takjin is sitting on his old truck, drinking a bit to clear his head. With a smile, he asks Tion if he wants to join him. But before we get to that, we go back to the shirt thing where Sate admits she might have gone a bit overboard with the decoration. She thought it would look good on him. The Baroness was on her way back when she ran into the Duke. Sate finds it weird that he's there, wondering why he's acting like Turd when he's holding a number 2. Then she figures maybe that's the Duke's problem, and in response, she gets a really loud no. The girl thinks she said it too loud, but Tion denies it, and sounding confident, he says he can read her like a book. His behavior leaves the Baroness with a bunch of doubts, like, are her thoughts really that obvious? And why is he acting like he's holding in number 2? Wanting to clear that up, she asks why he was pacing back and forth. That's when she realizes it's because he still hasn't managed to give the gift. Tion explains that even when he was a kid, he never gave gifts, so it's hard for him. Sate gives him moral support, even though deep down she feels bad for him. She laughs, imagining he also forgot because of Turd, and the Duke asks her to stop right there. Sate uses the conversation to vent and say that maybe Mr. Takbei didn't like her gift that much, and that she hopes he'll at least like what the Duke gives him. The Duke stays silent for a while. Then he says he's going to give the driver an accessory that matches her gift, including the brooch they bought together that day. And Sate looks so discouraged when she hears that. The Duke keeps his thoughts on the mission he has ahead of him. At night, when he meets up with the driver, the man asks if he drinks. Tion says yes and makes it clear he's better at it than Sate. They both seem confident about that, so the man is excited to share a drink. Tian soon shows up with his pretty cup, but Takchin clasps his hands together, explaining that when your superior is pouring you a drink, you should accept it with both hands. Right after that, the drink is poured. Mr. Takbei is already used to this, thinking it's sweet, while Tian's face is basically a spiral, and that's already enough to make him slur a little. It's a nice vibe, with just the two of them there, so the Duke takes advantage of the moment, handing over his gift, and well, if his guess is right, the man doesn't want to get close to them. Takchin asks why he went out of his way to give him a gift too, since he'll be leaving soon. Since it's just the guys there, the delivery guy feels comfortable talking and says things have been hectic since they brought in the dog that keeps tugging on his shirt and he doesn't even know what it actually wants. And Tian gets pulled into other thoughts, because even though he keeps thinking about the idea that the man is going to leave, he's gotten used to having him by his side. Maybe thinking about that made him blush, or maybe it was the drink he just had. Maybe he really is drunk, because on his own he admits he hasn't had someone that close since he was a kid, and without caring about his status, Takchin says he has an awful personality. The man asks if it's the brown-haired boy from that day, since he heard from him that they were friends. With a smile, the guy says yes, and adds that they have been ever since that particular incident. What happened was actually the planned elimination by the Emperor, who saw the Great House Northia as a threat, and thanks to his mother, Tantian was hidden somewhere safe. He stayed there until the next day, when a relative who was visiting the family found him. The man tried to hold him back, but it wasn't enough to stop him from witnessing the horror that happened to his family. Going up to him, the relative said it was hard to accept, but from that moment on, the family's fate was in his hands. Tian looks at his hand, clenching it tight like he's back on that day. He continues his story, saying the person he used to consider his friend turned his back on him. Rui found it hard to believe his father would do something like that, so from that day on, he lived his life chasing revenge. Tian starts trembling, thinking that if only he'd been wiped out along with the others. And of course Takchin isn't going to let that slide. He scolds him, calling him ungrateful for not realizing how precious his life is. Tian even tries to smooth things over, saying he didn't mean it like that. At least that's how he thought the other guy would react. After that, Takchin calms down a bit and reminds him he mentioned his daughter earlier, and says it's been a while since she left this world because of an accident. He says his daughter and wife were out for a walk when it happened, and the girl was just gone all of a sudden. That was something Tian had already kind of figured out from the way the man talked earlier. Takchin, though, looks like he's been sent back to that time as he remembers those awful days. He says that for a while he and his wife fought nonstop. The two of them said really nasty things out of pure resentment. Stuff like blaming each other for taking care of their daughter and preventing the accident. And in the end, just looking at each other made them think of their daughter, so they ended up going their separate ways. Left behind, Takchin could only think about how everything could have been different if he'd gone with them that day, and if the car had hit him on the way instead of his daughter. That pain of losing her turned his life into hell. Takchin puts a hand on the Duke's shoulder and asks if he gets what he means by that. And he says, "Believe me when I say your parents would have saved you 1,000,000 times." Tian answers that he seems pretty sure about that. The man smiles, confirming it. After all, he knows because he was a father once. Then he advises him to never again think about throwing his life away. Meanwhile, when Tantian went out to give the present and didn't come back for hours, Sate got worried and went out looking for them. And when she finds them, she's shocked by what she sees. The Duke is already collapsed on the ground, while the driver is still insisting on the last drops of the drink. All she can think is, what happened here? Sate goes over to Takbei, asking if he's okay, and all the man can see as he looks at her is what his little girl would have been like, and he even gets mixed up calling her his precious daughter. Still in the drunken haze, he asks, "How did you grow up so fast? Have you been eating well? How's school?" He says she hasn't been showing up in his dreams lately, and asks if she's going through anything. Still in the illusion, Takchin says that if she's going through something, she just has to tell him. After all, he's her father. And he says that as her father, he should have stayed with her for much longer. The man lowers his head, still holding Sate's hand, and says he misses her so much. The Baroness doesn't react to that. She just thinks it's strange how much he misses his daughter, until she realizes the man also lost his daughter. On impulse, Sate ends up hugging him, not knowing if it's really okay to follow her heart. Then, pretending to be his daughter, she says she misses him too, but the barrels back there catch Takchin's attention. That snaps him out of that cloud of illusion. Startled, he says the girl scared him and asks what she's doing there and if she's cold. Sate asks if he feels better now, and he confirms it. Looking at the Duke, he asks what happened to the young man. Takchin tells her not to worry about his condition, and that they need to focus on getting the Duke to bed or he'll end up freezing to death. Sate is the one who gets stuck with the job of carrying Tian, who's way too heavy. Takchin was way too drunk to do it, and he'd feel bad if he woke up a maid at this hour, especially the butler. But with a lot of effort, she managed to drag him. From the bedroom doorway, she can already see the bed, and she keeps dragging him over there. Sate climbs onto the bed, already apologizing for the lack of manners. Then she pulls the Duke up onto it, which she manages to do successfully. With the mission done, Sate gets ready to check if Mr. Takbei managed to make it to his room. But before she can take a few more steps, her arm gets grabbed.
It's the Duke holding onto her and keeping her there. The next day, the Baroness is with Daisy, who asks how she ended up there in the village. The girl even thinks she was being nosy, but Seat assures her it's fine and says she'll explain quickly. And everything she told her leaves Daisy wide-eyed, especially finding out about the engagement to the Duke.
Seat laughs, remembering that back then she thought she was being sent there to meet her end because of the rumors. Daisy admits she was terrified of the rumors too when she started working there, and says that except for Jeeves, His Grace rarely gives anyone orders, not even to help him with his bath. And that, honestly, he seems more used to being alone. The attendant says she prefers him like this rather than how the rumors made him sound. Sate, though, doesn't think he's unfriendly. She thinks he seems like a good person, and that he seems really lonely. That pulls a smile out of Daisy. Meanwhile, Sate gets pulled back to the night before, when the Duke kept her there, so Daisy asks in the middle of it, "Does that mean you're open to marrying him?" Thinking back to that night, Tian asked her not to leave. Not to leave him there, just not to leave him there alone. So Sate walked over to him, and with their faces close, she promised she wasn't going anywhere. The Duke asks if she really won't, and Seat assures him it's true, then tells him that now that he's awake, he should lie down properly. Tian lies down under his blanket and says he just realized he still hasn't given her a proper apology, which confuses her. Then he says he was rude when they first met too, and the Baroness is surprised that it's been bothering him even though he's who he is. Tian says he forgot how to be affectionate with other people, and with his past, it's not that hard to understand why. Holding the girl's hand, he says it's embarrassing for him to ask this, but he hopes the two of them won't leave. Seat is shocked by those words, but moved, she says she won't leave. She strokes his face, and the Duke falls asleep with the promise that they'll stay by his side. No surprise that the next day he woke up with a massive headache, and even though he got really drunk, he remembers the moments he had with Seat. Getting so irritated, he tears his own blanket. Just then, Jivisa rushes in, asking if everything's okay. Not just him, every servant in the house is there, and the Duke immediately orders everyone out. Seat shows up too, bringing something to eat in case he feels sick, and asks if she should leave as well. Tian just freezes at her presence, but he quickly pulls himself together and asks her to wait outside. Soon the Duke is ready and joins the others. Seat is surprised by how good he looks, and by how he doesn't seem that tired from last night, unlike Takjin, who looks completely wrecked. The Baroness says she was thinking about making a milk stew that he could eat easily. Then she shows what she actually made, which leaves him confused about the food. She explains that Takjin said instant noodles are the best cure for a hangover, so she made that. The man tells him to be grateful, because he was going to save it to eat later with drinks. Tian says what he just said is a breach of contract, but he's immediately shut up when he gets a spoonful of spicy noodles shoved into his mouth. Takjin offers some to Seat too, and both of them end up with their mouths burning. The man just smiles. Seat even tells him to try some, but the man looks melancholy, thinking about how he's gotten attached to them. He pats their heads, asking if they're feeling better, all while thinking about making the most of the time he'll be staying there. Seat even asks to eat, but Takjin claims he's already satisfied just watching them eat, and threatens to shove more into their mouths if they don't eat on their own. Turd was there watching the three of them, and then he leaves. Days go by. Tian is in his office when his butler comes in, and announces that His Highness is there to visit him. Tian asks what he's doing there, and Rui explains he's there to deliver something. It's just a simple invitation to the Imperial banquet. Tian drips with sarcasm about the invitation, like, sure, the Imperial family that reminds all the nobles who's in charge is inviting me after sending me to the borders because they were afraid of my power? And he already figures it's a way to pressure him into marrying the second princess. Rui just says there's no romance without a fancy banquet scene, and then there's an awkward silence between the two former friends. Tian gets straight to the point and says he doesn't believe he's there just to deliver an invitation. Then he asks the real reason he's there. The prince looks a little nervous about what he's going to say, but then asks how the driver and the Baroness are doing, and says he was surprised they were staying at his mansion. Tian stays suspicious that he isn't there for a social visit. Rui says he's really happy to see him doing so well, and you can see sincerity in his eyes. So Tian realizes he hasn't changed at all since he was little, which makes the Duke wonder, am I the only one who changed? Breaking the silence, the Duke explains they won't be staying much longer, and that he agreed to take them to the Saint on Foundation Day, which shocks the prince. Desperate, Rui says he can't do that. Rui says the saint is fake, just as Takjin walks into the room shouting for the Duke. Takjin is surprised to see the blonde guy there, but all the prince says, really quietly, is that she's his sister, like he's explaining the reasons. The two of them find out about the Imperial banquet. It leaves them impressed. Even Seat, who's used to this kind of thing, is surprised it's already party season. Rui asks if she's going to the banquet, but she hesitates and says no. Then Sate reveals she hasn't even had her debut in high society. The guys look straight at Takjin, who has no idea what any of this is about. Rui looks at them thinking. He asks why the two of them don't go as well. The two friends exchange high society signals, basically talking about inviting them, and Rui assures them it's fine. Takshin shuts it down and says they should forget it. What's an old man gonna do at a party for young people? Holding his hand, Rui asks him to drop that idea and says he'd love to see him there. He asks him to let him pay him back for giving him the courage to talk to his friend. Mission accomplished, the prince leaves. The three of them say goodbye to the boy, while Takbei rubs his ear in total panic. At that moment, the Duke and the Baroness trade a look that says, "Didn't he say he wasn't an aristocrat?" But changing the subject, the Duke asks if she's interested in going to the banquet, and Sate says yes. It's everything she wants. She'll get to dress up and dance gracefully to the music. Plus, she also heard they serve all kinds of food and award-winning drinks, and that's what catches the driver's attention. Taeyeon says she seems pretty well informed for someone who's never been to one, but what she knows is thanks to what her older sister told her. Sate says she used to tell her everything about the parties she went to, and little Sate would always listen with her eyes sparkling. The look she has now seems full of sadness. Taeyeon notices but doesn't say anything. Takshin, meanwhile, is only interested in going for the drinks. Taeyeon hands the invitation to the butler while saying the driver is going to need a custom-made outfit. Then he looks at him and says, "Unless you're planning to go like that." And Sate needs clothes too, because a banquet on this scale requires formal wear. All the nobles will be at the imperial banquet, which means she'll run into her family and her sister there. Meanwhile, the younger redhead walks into her father's office. She's there to say he can't just marry her off as Count Vente's second wife, but the Baron says he has no other choice since Sate ran away. The girl says that's why she said he should have married her to the Count and not the Grand Duke, and she questions whether, after all the financial problems that marriage caused, this is really the solution. The Baron immediately tells her to shut up, asking if she's challenging him, and he says if she has time to complain, she should spend it taking a bride course. Her father says, "This is an order, Villain Brody." Sate's life got really bad after her mother left. Then her stepmother took control and made her the villain of the story, demanding she stay hidden far away, out of her sight. And her father didn't care at all. Only one person reached out to her. Villain introduced herself as her older sister and said she didn't really care what their parents thought because she liked her. The redhead braided her hair, and that's how a friendship started. Villain said she showed up at the perfect time because she was tired of playing with her dolls. Someone calls out to Sate, pulling her back to reality, asking her to pick something from the catalog. Because Sate ended up being invited to the banquet too. But it wasn't just a simple invitation. The Duke begged Sate, saying he couldn't handle that beast on his own. That's why she was pressured to go too. He's already ready, wanting to wear the outfit he got as a gift along with the brooch, and he just needs to pick pants that match. The stylist says it won't be a problem. He'll just need to adjust it a bit. With a mischievous smile and his mind racing, he turns his gaze to the next victim, obviously Sate, and the Duke just watches while the redhead fires off a bunch of compliments at Sate, saying he'd been looking at her since earlier and thought her silhouette was absolutely stunning. Sure, she's going to kill it in any dress he makes, and he guarantees all the spotlight that night will be on her. So Taeyeon has to set some boundaries. The dress fitting starts. The first one is the classic favorite among noble ladies, fabulously voluminous and decorated with beautiful white lace. The next one is purple, with a seductive tone that goes great with accessories. The green dress is gorgeous too, but they have to change it right away. That's when Takshin gets the idea to take some photos. He snaps the first shot, catching the Baroness off guard. Then he shows it to the Duke, asking if it didn't turn out good. Seeing that was like a million fireworks going off in the Duke's head. He'd never seen technology like that. He immediately grabs the phone out of Taekba's hands. That kicks off a fight between them, because the driver is doing everything he can to save the battery. Right then, Sate shows up to stop them. Once she finds out why, the Baroness is also really impressed, thinking it's extraordinary to capture a moment like that instead of painting it. But Takshin wants to surprise them even more, and tells them to pay attention as he presses the button. The camera switches to the front, then Takshin takes a selfie. Finally, the day of the Imperial banquet arrives. Taeyeon is in his gorgeous wine-colored outfit, showing a duke's power just through what he's wearing. Takshin wears something modern, adapted from the gifts he got from his friends. And of course, one person couldn't be missing. Turd comes rushing in, lunging at the Duke. He's saved by the butler, who orders the dog to obey his master and guard the house. Taeyeon notices a smile on him and asks about it, but Jivesa says it's just his imagination. Outside, Takshin isn't happy about going in the carriage. It made him sick the whole trip. He wanted to go in his truck, but it doesn't belong to him anymore. And besides, they wouldn't be welcomed with the beast that shook this world. Taeyeon shows up asking why he's talking about his carriage. Then he shows where he and Sate will be taken. Takshin doesn't like that and accuses him of always keeping things for himself and having zero respect for his elders. But there's a reason. Taeyeon's afraid that if they leave together in the same cart, they'll get dragged into nasty gossip. Just then, Sate shows up apologizing for being late. She explains the maids wouldn't leave her alone. She says it's her first time dressing like this and asks the guys how she looks. At least from the Duke's face, you can tell how impressed he is. Sate is wearing a beautiful long pink dress that matches the shirt Takbe is wearing. Speaking of him, the guy doesn't waste any time handing out watches. Tion, meanwhile, can't stop admiring her. Still, the only thing he says is that since everyone's there, they should leave already. Then he turns his back. Sate hurries to start walking, but there's a problem. She's not used to wearing something this tall. Until the Duke offers her his hand, and the girl accepts, really grateful. He still doesn't look at her. Sate, though, is blushing just from that little touch. Either way, the Duke helps her up into the cart, while Takshin watches the whole thing thinking, "Are you kidding me?" After a while on the road, the Imperial Palace comes into view. It's so huge, shiny, and luxurious. Sate looks emotional because she never imagined she'd ever visit a place like that. Apparently, it was worth it, even if she had to squeeze into the cart. Takshin smiles at her. What matters is that the girl is happy. As expected, the hall is already packed with the invited nobles, and soon Duke Tantian joins in. The moment he walks in, he becomes the topic of the banquet. Everyone's whispering negative rumors about the monstrous Duke, and he looks at them with a cold stare that could end anyone's life in that place. But Taeyeon ignores all of it. The other two come in after, with Sate trembling as she passes through the crowd, and she's grateful the Duke drew so much attention that she ended up going unnoticed. And she also suggests he join the man, but it was just some random extra. And weirdly, a younger version of Takbe. The real one is right behind, and Sate apologizes, explaining it's hard to tell in a dress like this. The conversation is cut off by the announcement of His Majesty's entrance. Sate is already beside the Duke, bowing to the highest authority in the Empire, and she scolds the man next to her for not doing the same. But he doesn't care about formalities, because someone there caught his attention. Besides the Emperor and the Empress, Prince Rui is there too. Sate is completely shocked when she realizes he's the guy she threw up on at that restaurant. Still totally stunned, Sate bows before the Empire's little son. She's so nervous it feels like her memory's about to blank out on everything. Rui comes closer and, smiling, asks her to treat him like she always did. After all, he's the one who lied about everything. While Sate stays in shock, Takshin just says her old hairstyle looked better and complains about dyeing her hair because it makes her look like a delinquent. Then Rui introduces himself officially, saying it's an honor to meet him again, but Takbe overreacts and smacks the boy on the head, which obviously grabs everyone's attention around them. Sate tries to distract everyone with what's going on, while the Duke uses his clothes to make a shield so no one sees what happened. At least everyone loved the performance. Meanwhile, the Duke shoots Takbe a deadly look, basically saying this is the most he can do to help him. Later, the Grand Duke and the Crown Prince had to take care of their business. Meanwhile, the other two ran off to the balcony. Sate is completely nervous, and Takshin doesn't know what to do because he's scared of bothering her. The dance ball has already started. The melody catches Sate's attention. She tells Takshin that if she knew how to dance, she could teach him, but he tells her not to worry because there are more important things to have fun with. Then the man starts shaking around all excited, leaving the Baroness speechless. But soon she starts laughing because she thinks it's funny. He stops and asks, "Are you laughing at my dancing?" Sate keeps laughing, crying from how hard she's laughing, and thinks about what she'd do without the man being there. She's ready to shake it too. So while the others dance on the floor, Sate and Takshin dance excitedly on the balcony. The two of them move with the universal, timeless K-dance. Suddenly, the driver stops to ask if there's a bathroom around, because he's been needing to go since early. So Sate gives him directions on how to get there. Then she offers to take him, but obviously he refuses, not wanting to be treated like a 5-year-old. So Takebe rushes off in search of the bathroom. Sate watches him go with a small smile. Now alone, she decides to take in the night sky, to look at the stars as bright as her eyes. And she thinks about how, before she arrived, she was more anxious than excited, but now she's grateful she wasn't alone. That makes her remember that the moment is coming when Takshin will have to leave. And she doesn't understand why she's sad, since she was the one who offered to help him get back to his world. At that moment, someone she hasn't seen in a long time. Sate immediately turns around, finding Valan standing there, staring at her. Earlier, the redhead was with her father and another nobleman who was praising her. She seems happy about it, but deep down she's completely irritated by the situation. Then something caught Valan's attention, noticing Sate there juggling, and then she notices the girl with the prince, the duke, and another stranger. As she looks at her younger sister, an idea crosses her mind. Valan calls her father and asks if they can talk. The two talk, and the redhead says, shocked, that she saw Sate laughing and having fun like nothing was wrong. The Baron saw her, though, with the Grand Duke and says he's so in love with Sate that he brought her to the banquet. So he asks her not to provoke Tion and to stay out of trouble. because this could be the change they've needed for so long. But Velen isn't satisfied with that and tries to protest, only for her father to tell her to be quiet because there are more urgent problems. So the redhead realizes that maybe her father wants her to replace Sate. Following her plan, Velen greets her little sister. She says she didn't expect to see her again after she ran away from home, and hearing that, Sate apologizes with a sad, guilty look. But that reaction doesn't last long, because her sister says it was a nice show she put on earlier, and that the Grand Duke definitely can't be as cold as people say. Sate is surprised she saw it, and Velen reveals she also saw her doing those weird dance steps, making her little sister turn red as a pepper. Velen comes closer and, holding her hand, asks her to marry the Duke, because after her running away, the family is on the edge of ruin. The redhead pressures her and asks, "Or are you going to let me get sold off to some creepy old pervert because of you?" Marrying the Grand Duke wouldn't be a problem since he's kinder than she expected, and she knows that if she begs for a marriage, her request will be accepted. But Sate refuses, saying she wouldn't put that burden on his grace. That irritates Velen, who asks if the Duke is more important than her, who did everything for her sister, and besides, they're family. Sate says that actually she was the only one who thought they were. Until the day the engagement to the Duke was announced, Velen barged into the room questioning their father for wanting to marry her sister off to him, saying she'd end up being finished off by his hands. Sate smiled, thinking she was defending her, but the redhead suggested marrying her off to Count Vente, since that pig won't care as long as it's a woman. The girl says she always knew she was nothing more than a useful pawn, but even so, she wanted to trust. But that's not possible anymore, not after she met really nice people who care about her more than her own blood. So Sei refuses to stay in control of her sister. The two of them stay quiet for a while. Villain speaks again, saying the Duke doesn't care who she marries, and that 1 or 2 fractures can be treated before the wedding. The redhead walks up and orders, "Be good and wait for me downstairs, I'll come get you soon." Sate is confused, not understanding what she's planning. With an evil smile, Villain says, "Now they're gonna think you ran away from the Grand Duke too, you ungrateful brat." Then she pushes her sister. Sate goes into free fall, and when she opens her eyes, she's surprised she isn't feeling any kind of pain. And she also wonders what this soft thing is that cushioned her fall. Then, when she looks back, she's shocked to see Turd down there. Surprised, Sate asks the animal what he's doing there. Somehow, the animal managed to sneak into the carriage, and of course, leaving the butler behind completely desperate, thinking he's going to lose his head if he can't find him. But in the end, she's happy he's there and thanks him for saving her. Up above, Villain stares at her, stunned, trying to understand how this is possible. Oh, and of course, wondering what a dog is doing there. The redhead panics, knowing this is going to be bad, so she needs to fix it before the Grand Duke finds out. She leaves so she won't get caught at the scene of the crime, leaving behind her younger sister, who she just threw off the balcony. Turd starts tugging at the girl's dress, and she realizes she really needs to get out of there. But first, she needs to do something about her dress. So she rips off the decorations and leaves her shoes behind. Then she and Turd run off freely. Meanwhile, Taekbei has just come out of the bathroom feeling a lot better. Now his new problem is getting back to where he was, but it's a complicated mission when all the hallways look the same. Takching pushes past people to get through, and he gets stopped by a waiter offering a glass of wine. Obviously expensive, fancy, and delicious, and not something you can refuse. At that moment, someone calls him. It's the Duke, and the man quickly asks if he's finished his business. But Tian doesn't say anything, he just gives the man a look, which leaves Takchin kind of confused. And it makes him think his pants zipper is open. Tian says that's not why he was looking at him. Earlier, he met up with the Crown Prince. Rui tells him the truth again, that the saint is fake and the imperial family is just pretending. Tian doesn't really react to it, so he asks why he's telling him this. Rui explains it's because of the promise he made to Taekbei, and that really caught him off guard, this gesture. He says he knows he'll bring him to Ramoa on Foundation Day, making it clear there's nothing that can be done about it. The Empire's little son takes advantage of the fact they're talking to reveal that he had a vague idea that what the Duke said about his family was true, but even so he decided to give him a vote of confidence. But now, with guilt eating him up, he struggles to ask for his forgiveness. With a sad look, he says he won over a little boy's trust, letting his fear take over, and it's weighed on him ever since. Tian reminds him that they were both little boys back then, and that the prince is only 1 year older. Rui says he saw him spend time with those two and realized how they changed him. He says he wanted to tell the truth because he cares a lot. Tian says, "Then you should know I want revenge against the imperial family," and asks if he isn't afraid of what he'd do with a secret that could ruin him. Rui sighs and says he knows, but he's trying to make up for his past mistakes. Now Tian sighs, remembering that bitter conversation. At least Taekbei has a way to kill the bad vibe and says they should go back to the ballroom. But when they get to the balcony, he can't find Sate. The man looks around, searching for the girl. Tian also looks, searching for any sign. In the end, he finds the Baroness's dress decorations. His expression turns serious and threatening. Meanwhile, as Sate runs, she wonders what she's doing, realizing
thinking she should maybe ask those two for help. But then she remembers the Grand Duke prepared a separate carriage, which makes her think it's because he doesn't want the two of them to be seen together. Since she ran away from home, she's met some really great people who actually care about her more than her own relatives do. So she can't doubt them, and she knows they'll be happy to help her. And honestly, in a situation like this, trusting the right people is the right thing to do. With that decision, she tells Turd she's going to hide in the wagon, and she trusts the animal to go get help from the Duke and the driver. So they split up, each going their own way.
Sate stays quiet in the wagon, waiting, until she realizes maybe it was a bad idea. The girl starts shaking with fear, but she pushes those thoughts away and comes up with another idea. Even though she thinks it's not appropriate, she plans to hide in the Grand Duke's carriage. But right then, Vilain ends up finding her. The redhead puts a hand over her sister's mouth to hush her and tells her to come with her, saying it's time to go back home. Meanwhile, her friends are out looking for her. Takjin notices the Duke's look, like he wants blood, and tells him to calm down. Suddenly, they see Turd arriving. Not wanting to waste time, the Duke jumps off the balcony. Then he tells Takjin to do the same, and the driver just says, "You've got to be kidding me, right?" But he still goes along with it, only he messes up where he grabs on and is about to fall. Takjin falls, but the Duke's strong arms catch him. After staring at each other for a moment, Takjin asks him to put him down because he's not liking this either. They follow the dog. The Duke looks like he's in a terrible mood. While Takjin tries to keep his breath to catch up with them, then they stop. They find Sate being taken away by her relatives. Sate looks back and sees them there. In an authoritative voice, the Grand Duke says, "How dare you? Do my words mean nothing to you, Baron Brody?" The Baron throws himself to the ground, saying it has nothing to do with him and that it was his daughter's plan, claiming that even though he talked to her, the girl didn't listen. While Vilain gets irritated at her father for dumping all the blame on her. Scared, the redhead says she can explain. Tantian has that deadly look. Then she kneels in front of him. Meanwhile, Takjin is worried about the girl, asking what happened. Sate runs into his arms, really emotional, saying she knew they'd find her. Seeing the scene, the Duke tells the three of them to come back with him. He surprises them even more by carrying the girl, even though Sate protests, saying she can walk. But the Duke can't do that because he saw her limping. Lastly, he shoots the Baron a deadly look and says, "I'll deal with your punishment later," leaving Vilain scared. The girl screams, refusing to accept her fate. They head back to the carriage. Sate looks at the Duke beside her. She apologizes for getting him involved in that, but the Duke tells her not to. And he surprises her by saying he was really worried about her. Sate turns completely red at those words. After the incident at the Imperial banquet, they return to the village. Sate was treated right away by a doctor, getting the best care under the Duke's orders. Besides a mild sprain in her ankle, everything is fine, but the concern is that she got badly scared. Sate tells the Duke she's fine and that she doesn't think it's right that she has to take his bed. With that intense look, Tian says she needs to rest, and he tells her to lie back down. Sate is way too intimidated to argue. After the exam, the doctor leaves the room. The two of them are alone. Then Tian says that from that moment on, she won't have to deal with the Brody house anymore. At first, the girl is surprised, but she understands that those words mean he took action against her relatives. Sate knows what they did to her was horrible, but it was even more humiliating for Tian. After a moment of silence, the Duke stands up and says he's leaving because he has unfinished business to take care of. Before he goes, he turns back to order that her full recovery is his top priority and tells her to lie down. Daisy carries out her mission, taking care of the Baroness while she shoves a super creamy soup into her mouth, even though the other girl says she can eat by herself. While she's being fed, Sate thinks that at least her relatives are out of her life and they're definitely in ruins, but it turns out she isn't happy about it. Actually, she feels bad. Sate flops onto the bed, feeling really awful. Daisy has to bring Takjin to take a look, and he realizes it's indigestion. Luckily, he has the perfect cure for that, so he pulls a needle out of his pocket. The girls go on alert, wanting to know what he's going to do with the needle. With a scary look, Takjin says, "I just need to take a little of her blood." Daisy freaks out, saying he can't do that, but Sate surprises everyone by holding out her arm and says she trusts the man. Takjin comes closer and pricks her finger with a needle. Sate is even surprised that that's all it is. At least it was enough for the driver to see her dark blood. A clear sign of indigestion. While she's being treated, Sate realizes that both he and the Duke mean a lot. The Lord asks her to turn around so he can quickly massage her back. That's when she realizes her feelings for the Duke go beyond that. While she's getting the massage, Sate thinks that sometimes she feels something stirring inside her, and soon an image of Tian appears in front of her. But it's not an illusion. The Duke is really there. Noticing the girl seems to be doing better, all Sate can think is that now she understands what she feels for him is embarrassment. Tian breaks the moment to say that Foundation Day will be in 1 month. Then he calls the girl over. asking what she'll do after that. She immediately looks at Takebe, who will soon be leaving her life. To be honest, Sade hasn't thought much about it. The Baroness was so busy trying to run away from her family, but now that doesn't matter anymore. So she's honest and says she's not sure, and she's still figuring things out. That's all the Duke needs to know, so he has another question. He asks Takshin what he'll do if the Saint can't send him back to his original world. That catches everyone off guard, especially Daisy, since they'd forgotten she was even there. Tian has a big secret. He knows the Saint is fake, and the Imperial family is just pretending. The first thing that comes to his mind when he hears that revelation, and it has nothing to do with the Imperial family or even his revenge. He's still waiting for the man's answer to a question that shocking. The other two stare at each other. Takjin doesn't have an answer to that, because that isn't even an option. So the two of them just look at each other, and Taeyeon says it's just a joke and tells him not to take it seriously, which wasn't funny at all to the others. Takjin scolds him, saying to watch his words before they become real. Taeyeon says not to be stupid because there's no way that could happen, and he gets scolded again by the Lord for talking back like a brat. Meanwhile, Sate just watches, amused by all of it. But at the same time, she seems worried. Daisy, though, keeps a tense look on the Baroness, begging to leave. A few days pass, and Sate is still stuck in the same situation because the Duke wouldn't allow it. But when she finally got out of it, she went straight to the library. At that moment, Sate closes yet another book. She's already finished most of the ones that seem relevant to Takshin's situation, but even so, she still couldn't find a single piece of information that was actually useful. The deeper she digs, the more she thinks this strange phenomenon can only be solved by the Saint. So she thinks about it. What if even after finding the Saint, Takshin still can't go back? That makes her think it means they can stay together on the Grand Duke's estate. She goes even further, imagining them as a family, and the Lord living many years with them, all the way to the end of his life. After all, Takshin doesn't have a family to go back to either, like she does. But thinking about it leaves her with a sad look, wondering when she became so selfish. Meanwhile, the Duke is training outside, taking down his target easily. He's also thinking about the same thing. Tion is afraid that telling the truth will leave Takshin disappointed. But maybe if the man realizes leaving this world is impossible, he'll end up like that. So, like Sade, he imagines the three of them living together, and the same ending as hers. It makes him feel like the biggest selfish person. At the same time, Takshin is having his own moment, in a tight match against the butler. Once again, Jaivisa won. To Takshin's shock, he thought he'd never played chess before. Turns out it's really similar to another game the butler knows, so it was pretty easy to learn. With a friendly smile, Jaivisa invites him to another match. So, with mixed feelings, everyone waits for one thing: Foundation Day. By then, Takshin has already lost everything in a chess bet. It's crazy how fast time goes there, and in the blink of an eye, the long-awaited Foundation Day arrives. Takshin is wearing a traditional hood while looking at his old companion. Then they call him, asking if he's ready to go. The Duke and the Baroness are there, along with Turd. Soon, Sade explains it's just for company since she won't be able to see the Saint, and she says that since Takshin is leaving forever, they want to say goodbye together. There's a silence between them, but Taeyeon, watching all this, knows the guy isn't going anywhere. She asks why he's waiting there instead of being at the entrance. Takshin explains he got sad about having to leave the truck behind. It was his loyal companion, by his side through everything. Thinking about it, Takshin knows he's gonna get one hell of a scolding for missing the delivery, and on top of that, he'll need money to buy a new truck. So he asks the Duke if he can have his old buddy back, and the Duke just agrees. But the gas is running out, and he's afraid it'll die in the middle of the road, so Tian suggests dragging it with a horse like last time. Not being very sharp about this kind of stuff, the delivery guy thinks that for this mission they might need 43 horses pulling the truck. Takshin says he'll go in his truck, so the others have the advantage in the carriage. So the three of them head out for Foundation Day. The driver keeps traveling with his truck. Soon he arrives at the place, just like the others who are there. Pope Oh My God introduces himself to everyone. Even with that kind of weird name, Takshin doesn't say anything, but that's because the Duke made it very clear they were inside a temple and told him to behave. So this time he's just going to sit there. The ceremony starts with the Pope honoring the all-powerful goddess for her blessings on the land. While he keeps going with his blessing, Takshin ends up falling asleep and snoring really loud. The Duke shakes him, telling him to stay awake. Takshin wakes up on alert. The Duke shows him what finally matters there: the Saint. Takshin feels a mix of surprise and nervousness, but the only thing he can do right now is sit there listening to that Pope still talking about holiness. Meanwhile, Sight and Turd wait outside. She notices there's an open area in the cathedral, so she decides to wait there since the main hall is packed. The two of them walk until something catches her eye and makes it light up. In front of her is a statue, which makes her think that right now Taekbai must be having an audience with the Saint. But it's like they're still at the very beginning of everything. Back to Sate, she believes it's time to say goodbye, and maybe Turd understood the same thing. Anyway, she kneels in front of the image and puts her hands together to pray. In that moment, she's taken back to an old memory of her mother. Little Sate says she doesn't have to work the next day, so she'd like her to play a bit. She asks if by praying from the bottom of her heart, the goddess wouldn't grant her wish. But her mother tells her to pay close attention to what she's about to say. Sate, the goddess doesn't exist, and no matter how much you pray, your wish will never be granted. And she asks her to never pray again, especially in front of other people. Sate does it now after many years and tries to believe that maybe the reason her mother did that was because she had to work so much, and not having her wish granted would end up leaving her disappointed. But now the girl has a reason to believe in the goddess, and Takbe is proof she exists. Sate has the feeling it was the goddess Mareka who sent him to her, so she prays that Takbe, who helped her become a better person, returns safely to his original world. She starts her prayer by calling out to the goddess. Sate does it from the bottom of her heart and is lit up by a divine light. Meanwhile, the high priest is passing by, until a sound catches his attention. Holy Mother notices something is happening with that girl. Something so shocking it makes him open his eyes. Meanwhile, those two finally had their audience with the saint. Takshin walks through the cathedral, really impressed. Soon the path leads them to the Empire's little moon. Ramoa skips the formalities and goes straight to the point, asking Tian who the stranger at her side is. Takshin wanted to comment about skipping the formalities, but he gets that look from the Duke that makes him shut up immediately, so he asks her to go on. Tian starts by saying for her to listen to the man's story and give some guidance about it. Ramoa just notes she's never seen Takshin and asks a bold question. Are you accepting him as your Grand Duchess? Takshin didn't get it, so Tian has to explain what that meant, which obviously made the driver irritated, and the Duke had to calm him down. After hearing the whole story, the saint is ready to talk to the goddess. While the girl lights the candles, Tian wonders how she managed to act like a saint in front of everyone. Ramoa throws the candelabra onto the altar, and the flame spreads until it reaches the goddess's statue. So the Empire's little moon calls out for the goddess to answer her. The two of them watch, and Tian can only think this looks way more like a furious warrior than a worshipper. Then, after the whole show, the girl says the goddess answered. The answer is, there's nothing to be done. And then she kicks the two of them out. Now it's Sate's turn to hear the whole story, and she starts wondering what they can do to fix this situation. She's also addicted to the otherworld snacks. While the two talk, Takshin is there reflecting on his failure. Then the Duke calls him over. He kneels in front of the man and asks if he doesn't want to stay until they find a way back to his world. Sate watches that, feeling emotional. Tian says it might sound selfish, but he admits that ever since he met the two of them, he finally managed to get the idea of revenge out of his head, and he asks if he won't stay by his side a little longer. That's when Sate realizes Tian has been wanting the same thing too, and she admits she feels the same. She says she wants him to stay by her side for a while longer. All Takshin can say right away is that they don't need to be so dramatic. The driver scratches his head, kind of awkward, and says that either way, he's got nowhere to go. With a big smile, he tells them to go back home. The problem is his truck is out of gas, but luckily Tian really does have 43 horses. Meanwhile, the high priest reports his discovery about the appearance of the true saint. After all, like the goddess said, I will answer the sincere plea of my vessel with a beam of golden light. And the person who met the requirements was at the temple, and of course he says she was accompanied by the Grand Duke. The Emperor is shocked that House Northia is involved in something like this again. Rui is there too, and he's stunned to learn Sate really is a saint. The high priest says the true saint is a threat to both the imperial family and the church, and that he finds that extremely worrying. He asks His Majesty if he doesn't agree. The Emperor agrees the threat needs to be cut off at the root. Listening and fearing for his friends' lives, Rui asks how he can believe the high priest's words. After all, who guarantees it isn't just his imagination, and that it's too soon to assume the lady has ties to the Grand Duke. But the Emperor just says his son is always defending that bastard, and says he's been way too nice to him, so he orders the royal guard to seize the Empire's little son. Rui asks him to forgive them. Even while begging his father, the boy is thrown out. The Emperor leaves the high priest with the mission of handling the situation however he sees fit, and says he expects good results, and of course he'll do as desired. The Emperor just wants none of them left. Meanwhile, the three of them keep traveling by carriage to where Takshin left his truck, which is really far away, but at least one guard stayed behind watching it. Sate takes advantage of them being there and says they need to come up with a new plan to help Takbai return to his original world. She says she finished all the books in the library and asks the Duke if he knows where to find more information. Taeon says he can ask Rui for access to the Imperial Library, and a little hesitant, Sate asks how she dare ask that of the Crown Prince when she's just a fugitive baroness. Then Taeon asks, what if you make the request as the Grand Duchess, leaving her in shock? But then he says it's just a joke, and that he doesn't care who his Grand Duchess is going to be. He makes a bored face like he really doesn't care. Sate says his sense of humor is awful. A terrible tension settles between them, something Takjin would have to deal with. But then the carriage suddenly stops. The Duke immediately gets out
to see what happened, and he understands why. Not knowing again, Takjin asks what's going on, but he gets a cold answer from the Duke to stay quiet and not come out of there. The driver just thinks someone got run over. Meanwhile, the Duke is outside, his eyes fixed on the problem. In the forest, several hooded men holding daggers are waiting for him. He says, "How bold of you attacking me out in the open." The men notice the Duke is unarmed, so they move in. But the Duke isn't a fool like them, and he draws his blade. Tian is a swordmaster and can swing it easily, dealing with all of them. That's why one of the masked guys thinks about putting him at a disadvantage by blocking his vision. But the Duke's well-trained and immediately sees what he's trying to do. He easily gets out of the smoke bomb. Then Tian catches up to the last one.
After he's done with all the villains, he looks around to see if his companions are okay, but he finds Takjin crawling and badly hurt. Takjin tells him they kidnapped Seat. That leaves the Duke terrified and desperate. Takjin gets up, ready to go after the girl, but Tian won't allow it and promises he'll bring Seat back by himself. So he asks the Sir to return to the mansion right away to get proper treatment. Thing is, while the Duke was busy fighting, the High Priest got into the carriage, and he immediately shoved his hands into Seat. At that moment, Takjin stood up right away, ready to stop him, and that's when he was attacked. The unknown man captured the girl. While she was being dragged away, Seat screamed for him, and in the end, she called him Dad. That's why Takjin is determined to save her no matter what. Meanwhile, Seat is in some kind of abandoned cabin. She finally wakes up, and her friends look for any trace that might show what happened. Tian grabs one of the men who attacked him. Looking closely, there isn't a single mark that shows who he works for. But Tian knows, if they dared to attack the Grand Duke, there's only one faction that would do that, the Imperial family. Looks like that forgotten revenge is gonna have to come back. Soon Takjin joins them, asking if there's any clue where they took the girl, but the Duke tells him to stay still since he only stopped the bleeding temporarily. Even though he has a lead, Tian doesn't understand why the Imperial family would kidnap Seat, so he starts thinking they'll use the girl as bait. The Duke starts trembling, blaming himself for everything that happened, because now someone he loves is in trouble again. Suddenly, a noise from the bushes startles him. He immediately pulls out his dagger, and then the culprit shows up. Turd is there. Tian calls him by name, then apologizes, saying he wasn't accusing him, he was just calling him. The Duke remembers the dog also helped them at that crucial moment at the Imperial banquet, so he asks if he knows where Seat is. With a sad bark, the animal confirms it, so the Duke asks him to lead the way. Takjin interrupts them, reminding them he doesn't know how to ride a horse, suggesting they go by truck. Tian asks if the gas hadn't run out. Then Takjin answers, "If there's one thing life taught me, it's that I can still drive 30 to 50 miles even after the low fuel warning light comes on." The driver gets dragged back to his truck, finding the captain there taking care of things. The two of them get into the monstrous machine, but Takjin notices something. Why is the Duke sitting in the driver's seat? Tian explains he can't drive in this condition, and tells him not to worry because he watched him drive that thing for a long time. Taikbei tries to protest, arguing he doesn't have a license, but Tian yells, and with his hands shaking on the wheel, he says he can't lose him too. He says, "So trust me and I'll do whatever it takes to save you two." In the end, the trucker accepts it, so things get kind of friendly between the two of them. Takjin teaches the guy how the truck works. Meanwhile, Seat is still in the High Priest's clutches. When he saw her at the temple, he thought it was the perfect opportunity. After all, the church is run by a corrupt hierarchy that doesn't recognize talented people, and because of that, he lost 5 times at the conclave. But if he has true holiness at his disposal, he can surpass the Pope and even the Emperor, becoming the supreme authority. And luckily for him, with the reckless Emperor blinded by rage, he put him in charge of finding the saint. Seat wakes up, and when he realizes it, he breaks into a smile. A little disoriented, the girl asks who he is and if her friends are okay. She tries to move, but realizes her hand is tied up. Holy Moly introduces himself to her as the Empire's High Priest. Seat thinks that name is weird, and who wouldn't? Holy Moly thinks she's making fun of his name, but then he apologizes for being disrespectful and calls her saint. Of course, Seat finds that weird since the Imperial Princess already fills that role, but the High Priest reveals she's a fake and that the Imperial family and the main members of the church already know it. He holds the girl's chin while saying, "More importantly, your very existence is proof that you're the true saint." Still confused, Seat says it's a mistake because she doesn't have any great powers. Holy Moly doesn't mind, because if the girl doesn't believe it, all she has to do is put it to the test. And there are 2 ways to awaken a saint's powers. So he explains that the first one is unfortunately hard to test right now, so the second option is more suitable, a more visceral method. It's about the saint's healing ability, as written in the scriptures. As he makes a cut on the girl's cheek, he says her ability should activate when she's on the verge of death. With a twisted smile, he asks, "Are you ready to begin?" The girl is completely shocked and obviously scared. But the platinum-haired guy says he's just kidding, because he doesn't need to test her powers to know she's the saint. The High Priest says the Emperor was just waiting for a chance to get rid of the Grand Duke, questioning how a ruler can remove people like that out of fear, and that this is corruption at its worst. He says that's why he wants to join forces, so that together they can change the empire. The high priest asks her to join his proposal to protect everyone she loves. Then he holds out his hand, asking her to shake it to confirm, promising she won't regret working together. Problem is, the girl is still tied up. Sate doesn't answer because it reminds her that he hurt someone important to her. The high priest asks if it's the servant with the dirty clothes, and the girl quickly defends him, saying he's a valuable knight. The girl says that even though he talks about corruption, he's there attacking and coercing innocent people to serve his interests, throwing it in his face that he's no different from them. Sate refuses to be in other people's hands, even if that means her life ends there. So she yells that they're not going to work together. But the high priest just looks at her with a pleasant smile because he expected that. With something sharp in his hand, he says he's been kind, and even so she's rejecting his kindness. Raising the dagger, he asks, "That makes me wonder how many cuts it'll take for you to please me?" Outside, you can hear confused shouting about hitting the brakes. Suddenly, Takjin's truck crashes into the cabin, plowing through everything in its path. The Duke is driving while the driver yanks his hair, and all of it heading straight for Holy Moly. Sate watches all of it, stunned, seeing what happened to the high priest. The truck door opens, with Takjin yelling, asking the girl if she's okay. That makes her remember when they first met. Sate looks at him, emotional, being saved once again by that truck. Takjin runs straight to her, worried about what happened to her face. He helps the girl get free. Now Takjin can finally breathe a sigh of relief, because it had left him completely desperate. Sate says they need to get out of there immediately, but the man ends up collapsing, leaving her panicked, especially when she notices the fluid staining his shirt. She starts screaming for him. Meanwhile, Tian is dealing with the airbag that went off, obviously annoyed, thinking Takjin did it. Both he and Turd jump out. As soon as he pulls himself together, he hears Sate's screams, and only one thing runs through his mind about what's happening. Tian immediately goes into the cabin, finding Takjin lying on the floor. He doesn't want to let it be like this. Sate is crying a lot. The Duke looks at her in despair, feeling the same pain of loss. Sate screams for the driver while her tears fall like a waterfall. Outside, the high priest is lying there, badly hurt. Holy Moly gets up. He's really confused, trying to understand what happened and whether the blurry figure in front of him is the Duke, and he wonders how he managed to find them. This is a threat to his plans, because if the Duke takes the Saint, everything will be ruined, and he refuses to lose like that. So he intends to put an end to the Duke right there. Then he lunges, taking advantage of the situation, his blade just centimeters from the Duke's eyes. But the dagger doesn't hit the eye, it hits the prince's hand. Rui stepped in front of his best friend, and Tian looks shocked, wondering what the blonde guy is doing there. It obviously didn't please the high priest, whose plan gets interrupted once again. With his injured hand, Rui says there's no time to explain, but at least he says the platinum-haired man planned all of this together with his father. The boy barely had time to explain because his friend quickly snatched his sword. Holy Moly looks on with terrified eyes, refusing his fate. But the monstrous Duke already has him under control, and with a single swing of his sword, he proves why he's called the human guillotine. Tian is satisfied with that. Rui looks impressed because his plan was only to tie up the high priest. The Duke gets straight to the point, asking what he's doing there. Without interruptions, the prince is ready to talk. A few hours earlier, he was imprisoned. Unfortunately, the guard couldn't grant his request because he was just following orders. Rui cries, feeling powerless, thinking everything is his fault, just like what happened in the past. He thinks it's his fault for never stepping out of his father's shadow, which is pretty ironic for someone they call the son of the empire, but he wants to do something to warn his friend about the plan, even if he has to jump from up there and survive the fall. Suddenly, something happens that grabs his attention. Then the door opens. Roe has no idea what happened, but he uses the chance to escape. He was searching the nearby area when he heard a loud crash, so he went over there to see what it was, and that's how he found them. After finishing his story, Roe asks where Sate is. Tian flinches when he hears him ask about Takshin, but something makes the prince drop to the ground. His eyes go wide, shocked that what they said is true. What Tian sees surprises him too. While she prays, Sate is lit up by a golden light, and her eyes turn golden too, like the sun itself is inside her. The light is so intense, it blinds both of them, but it's even stranger for Takshin, because he suddenly wakes up, wrapped in the strong light, floating. He gets up and looks around, thinking he's dead, but a voice says he's not. It says, "Nice to meet you. I'm the one you've been looking for, and I'm the one who can send you back to your original world." Finally, Takshin is standing in front of the goddess. He asks if this is because Sate is a saint and the goddess can reveal herself because certain conditions were met. The goddess says it's like the high priest said, and the saint has to meet certain conditions: her blood, her tears, and a prayer. The goddess says that even though she can explain through the saint how she ended up there, it's kind of a long story. So that's why she called him into Sate's subconscious. Takjin is surprised to learn where he is, and while messing with a few loose, shiny strands, he gets why. But actually, those are just the goddess's hair strands. Takjin calls her closer. He grabs her hair, saying it's distracting. Now he can finally focus on what she's saying. The goddess starts talking again after that huge bit of nerve. Mareka, the all-powerful one with the ability to see the future, explains that the only way to use her abilities in this world is through a saint as a vessel, so she chose a human who could fill that role and gave her high status and authority. Then one day, a certain human took only his weapon to face the goddess, but since he needed his people's support, he decided someone else would replace the saint. So he had no idea that an illegitimate child with saint blood running through their veins was living among ordinary people. Afraid they'd be wiped out by that man's rage if their sacred blood was discovered, they kept their powers secret, while the goddess herself was cut off from this world for about 500 long years. Now Takjin can actually pay attention to everything with the goddess's hair pinned down. Knowing how the story ended, he says, "So you're not that powerful after all." And being honest, Mareka confirms she isn't. She says she's just a tool to help the saint, the real main character, awaken her powers. The goddess is holding the book, and obviously Takjin is way too slow to understand what she's saying, so she reveals that none of this is anything more than a made-up world. Mareka keeps going. It was already year 499, and she was desperately trying to contact a saint, or even just a single human around her, and the only thing she managed was possessing some insignificant creature. She wandered around the world complaining that even though she was a goddess, she was basically trapped within four walls. Until in year 500, on one of her rounds, she heard that girl say she was ready for another reading. That's when the girl's deep affection for the story, mixed with the goddess's omnipotence and a bunch of other things, made her realize she was inside a fictional world. After that, Mareka started watching the reader whenever she was reading the story. One day, the girl commented that if she were the protagonist, she'd pray to the goddess and get rid of the fake saint before even meeting the protagonist. And hearing that, the goddess thought it was a genius move. She figured the reader could turn saint into a saint as fast as possible. So Mareka took advantage of that accident to transfer the girl's soul into saint's body, something she'd never tried before, but confident because there's always a first time. After all, she's a powerful goddess. But we know how things ended. And of course Takjin didn't take it well. Annoyed that he ended up there because of the goddess's stupid mistake, he grabbed her hair again. Mareka quickly explains that there wasn't much she could do since she didn't expect this to happen. Takjin calms down, finally letting the goddess go. The goddess says that ever since that happened, she hasn't been able to see much beyond the romance, and she also has no idea what happened to the reader who got run over. She says that meanwhile the driver kept causing trouble in this world. Mareka complains, saying he has no idea what she went through, having to possess random creatures to chase him down, and that explains that fallen guard, because it was all her way of tying up loose ends. So now we know Mareka is turd. Something catches Takjin's attention. Then the goddess explains that Sate must be feeling mentally overwhelmed, since it's the first time she's summoned her. Mareka says that now that the girl has access to her powers, she'll be able to call her anytime after she rests a bit. As the game kicks the goddess out, she says that when Sate calls her, she'll send him back to the original world. So the two of them wake up. Takjin and Sate scream, and together they learn about the Baroness's holiness. Then the story gets told to the others. They stare at the goddess Mareka, and in turd form she barks, confirming it's her. The Duke can only think about what their relationship was like. He says the worst is already over thanks to his healing power, otherwise Takjin would have gone to another world with no way back. Hearing that, the driver complains, telling him not to jinx him. But even with this miracle, Taehan says he can't forgive the imperial family for what they did, and he swears that when he's done, he'll take the emperor's head so he can never go against him again. He yells that he'll never hurt him again. Takjin touches the Duke's shoulder and calls him. Taehan's mind is still haunted by what happened to him years ago. With teary eyes, he turns around and says he'll never lose the people he loves again. In a calm voice, Takjin calls his friend. He asks him not to cry because you never know what might fall around there. Someone calls out to Taehan. It's Rui, asking him not to push himself like that. He says that up until now, he let fear control him and only watched everything from far away so he wouldn't accept the situation they were put in. The prince says he didn't understand why he had to be there, but now he does. Rui understands he's there to protect the people close to him and make sure they don't end up with blood on their hands, so he plans to become the emperor. Takjin reminds him that somehow he'll do it, but the prince wants something faster, through a revolution. Rui knows his friend is suffering, and he tells stories from when they were kids, like the time the Duke got sad, like when he hit a bird and cried. Really embarrassed, Taehan asks him to stop with those stories. The prince says it's time to pay with weapons, and asks if he'll have faith in him and wait for him to fix things. Taehan looks at him, still red with embarrassment, but he ends up agreeing. Then, after leaving the necessary care in place to deal with the consequences, the three of them return to the village, and Jivisa wonders why every time they come back, they bring chaos with them.
Together, they talk about how to get back to their world. Sate also wants more details, since she doesn't remember much of what happened. Marika is paying close attention to the conversation, anxious to see if Takshin will say they're just characters in a romance novel. A little panicked, Takshin says it was an accident. For sure after that, the goddess's reputation won't be the best. Oh, and he almost forgets. Then he tells Sate that when she feels better, she can tell the goddess to send him back to his world. That surprises Sate. After that, 2 weeks go by. At that point, Takjin is taking care of his old friend, wiping here and there. A voice says he tried everything, but there was one thing he couldn't fix. It's the Duke standing there. Takjin is chill about it, happy that at least his truck got brought back, all thanks to the 43 horses. And he asks Tian to thank the animals for him. Since they're alone, the Duke asks if he doesn't want to go back home. Takjin says he doesn't know what Korea's situation is like right now, so he plans to go back soon. Something catches the guy's attention. It's Sate standing there. When she realizes she's been seen, she pretends she has a headache and feels a little dizzy. Pointing at the fountain, the girl says that if they play in the water, maybe she'll feel better. Then she asks the driver if he doesn't want to stay with them. Takbe looks at her with a small smile and says maybe she wants him to accidentally stay there with them. Either way, he agrees with the saint's idea of playing in the water.
Soon, night falls. Sate is curled up in her bed, thinking that things just aren't right. After all, she knew from the start that she'd have to separate from Taikbai, but she understands she needs to talk to the goddess, and she'll do that the next morning. Then she hears someone knocking on the door. Someone who really wants a moment. Sate gets up, and when she opens the door, she asks why he's here at this hour, and she waits for the Duke's answer. The Duke is let in. Sate tells him to make himself comfortable in the room, and he does, lying down beside her. And well, there's no way to get more comfortable than that. Taeyeon sits on the bed and says he was worried she had a lot on her mind because of everything that's happened these past few days. Sate looks at him with teary eyes and asks if he already knows. She says she still hasn't fully recovered and she's ready to call for him. The Duke stays silent for a while, and turning his gaze to the night outside, he's ready to talk. He talks about when she was kidnapped and Takjin got hurt, how that was when, for a moment, he thought he was really going to lose him. And strangely, that made him realize there are people in his world who care about the driver just as much as he does. We know a bit about Takjin's life, admiring the family photo he used to have, driving a lot until he delivers all the packages, meeting up with his friends for a good night of drinking, and then passing out drunk on the couch. Sate cries, knowing Takjin has people on the other side, but the idea of never seeing him again is unbearable, and she's afraid he'll disappear from her life from now on. Tian holds her hand and says that together they can get through this. He says they'll do it whenever they visit the capital, take a walk through the forest, or even when they eat something spicy. Either way, they'll have lots of memories to look back on. With tears in her eyes, Sate says she'll remember Taikbai for the rest of her life, and the Duke agrees. Suddenly, Sate throws herself against the Duke, and he makes the noble gesture of hugging her while she cries a lot. The result is his clothes soaked with tears. Soon morning comes. Then they ask Takshin if he's ready. All the important people he had during the 6 months he stayed there are there. Sate looks at him, emotional. Takshin comes closer, saying what he's about to do is nothing. He takes off his hat and puts it on the girl's head. With a smile, he says it's a gift. The prince wants something too, but Takshin tells him to buy another one since he has plenty of money. Face to face with Sate, the driver tries to calm her down, saying crying doesn't make people pretty. There's not much to do about the prince, who's melting into tears, crying that he didn't get to spend much time with the man. The prince goes up to him and hugs him. Then Takshin says to the other one, "Stop looking like that and come here." And that's for the Duke, who's trying to hide it. At least Sate doesn't waste time. The girl joins in for the hug. Soon Sate begins the ritual, and she prays fervently to the goddess. As she does, she's flooded with the good moments she had, and that's how she says goodbye to her savior knight. All the light covering Takjin disappears. He's finally back. The driver looks around thinking it all felt like a dream and that he just dozed off at the wheel. But then he finds proof in his truck, so there's no way it was a dream. Takjin is shocked when he notices on the ground the girl he almost ran over, and also the one to blame for what happened. But what matters is that she's okay. Takjin goes to help her, asking if she's okay and giving her a little scolding about not crossing on a red light. He notices something on the ground that really catches his attention. It's a book, so he picks it up. Takjin looks at the book, emotional. The reader finds that teary smile weird and immediately wonders if he ended up reincarnating into the novel. That freaks the girl out, saying it should have been her. But all Takshin wants to know is where he can buy that book. And what about the others? Well, Sate writes a letter about how things happened. In the letter, she says a lot happened, and the most shocking thing is that the Grand Duke isn't that anymore. Well, I mean, he still has the title, but now he's just Taeyeon. After Takshin left, the saint kept thinking about how she wanted to live her life. Obviously, a life where she's free from the aristocracy and noble duties. Remembering the time she traveled was what made her decide what she wanted. That's how Sate walked into His Grace's office, saying she's she's decided she's going to travel. The Duke at that moment has some papers and scrolls in his hand. He throws everything back onto the table, saying he's coming to, leaving Sate shocked. She thought he was busy with his duties as Grand Duke. Then Tion says, I'm going to stop being a Duke. I never even wanted to be a Duke. Lately, he's been a lot more honest. The only reason he wanted power was to get revenge on the Imperial family, but the two of them showed him something way more important than that. He says he'll ask his uncle to make it happen. And that's the story of the guy who went to sleep and woke up as a duke. Meanwhile, Tion kneels in front of the saint, kissing her hand as he asks if she won't need a knight to go with her on her trip, leaving her confused. With sincere eyes, he asks her to hire him. All Sate says is that she doesn't have money for that. One thing led to another, and in the end, Tion joined the trip. Now together, Sate says they should visit the Imperial family because of the goddess's warning that a flood would happen in 6 months, so they need to prepare for it. Tion asks if she can't just send a letter like the other times. The thing is, it's a serious problem, but Sate doesn't have much time to think because the prince distracts her. Either way, they had to do it. And that's when we learn about Rui. The little son kept his promise and became the emperor. Apparently, he convinced a lot of influential aristocrats and took the throne earlier than expected. Ramoa is also by her brother's side, even though the real saint, Sate, ended up rejecting that role. So, to keep chaos from spreading, the Empire's little moon keeps acting as the saint. She admits she was annoyed by Rui's little habits, but now that she's not trapped anymore, she can keep pretending without any problem. Sate keeps updating things in the letter. The two of them are ready for another trip. So Sate hopes her letter makes it to Takshan. Marika appears, asking if she wants to send the letter, which surprises Sate since they wrapped up the story with a happy ending. She suggests something bolder. What if they went to his world? After all, she's the powerful great goddess. Now we're going to learn a bit about Takshan. Well, he still has that selfie as a souvenir from his adventure. He's just a regular middle-aged guy in Korea who works as a truck driver making deliveries. Like usual, he finishes another hectic day, but it was only late at night, on his way back home, that his life got weird again. He gets out of the truck to complain about the high beams, saying he almost got transported to another world again. But his expression changes when standing in front of him is the one who always called him Takebe. Alright, that's it for now, guys. What did you think of this story? Because honestly, I need a moment. This manhwa came out of nowhere and just absolutely got me. But what do you guys think about the chemistry between these two? Because I personally love a romance that mixes a little tension with a little humor. 1 second he's being all cold and unreadable, and the next she's accidentally calling him handsome to his face and pointing at some random extra to cover it up. Like, that balance is so good to me. It keeps you on your toes the whole time. And okay, can we appreciate for a second how different this story is? Because we've seen a million isekai plots where someone dies and wakes up in another world, but a 53-year-old South Korean truck driver just showing up in the middle of a fantasy empire, completely clueless, thinking everyone around him is filming a movie. It makes everything feel more real somehow. Like the story is grounded in a way that most romance manhwa just isn't. Drop it in the comments. Did Tion win you over from the beginning, or did it take a while? Because I feel like everyone has a different moment where they just fully flip for him. This was Mr. Delivery Night up to chapter 39. Like and subscribe if you want the continuation because we are so not done here. Kisses, and see you next time.